Call the meeting to order for the January 25th, 2022 study session. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
Thank you. Going into current business, the first item we have are clarification on the consent calendar. Do we have any from council? Councilman O'Neill? Councilman Duffield? No. Councilwoman Dixon?
No.
Councilwoman Renner? No. Councilman Avery?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Blom?
I have none.
And I have none as well. Second study session item, Orange County Housing Finance Trust update from Grant Henninger. Would you like to give a presentation, or is there any request for?
We may need to move on to the next item.
Is he not
until
here? Thank
he
you.
arrives. Yes.
Okay, so we'll table that item. Moving on to item 3, the housing element update. Mr. Georges?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Muldoon and City Council members. So we're going to provide a brief presentation. With me is Deputy Director Jim Campbell. We recently received our comment letter from HCD based on our draft housing element. This is our second round of comments, about 9 pages long. And what we're seeing throughout Orange County and the Skag region, it's pretty much the average number of pages for second round comments. We just have a very brief presentation, 10 slides. We have one question for the City Council that we'd like to ask on what to do with Banning Ranch. HCD has said that they're not going to accept those units on Banning Ranch. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Campbell. He'll run through that presentation, and then we can get some feedback from the City Council.
Thank you, Simone. As indicated, we're going to be touching upon the Banning Ranch item, but real quick where we're at. As Simone indicated, we did receive our second comment letter from HCD. The basic summary of those comments are they want additional information about affirmatively furthering fair housing. They want us to analyze those trends a little more closely and patterns and develop an action plan for that. Our consultant, Dave Barquest of Kimley Horn, is working on that as we speak. They had some general comments about our sites analysis. Do we have enough substantial evidence to support all the housing opportunity sites? And then as Simone indicated, Banning Ranch was a specific topic that they were concerned about. They also wanted some clarification and milestones and timing for our housing element programs. Generally, our programs are all going to be implemented over the next 3 years once this is adopted. And so it's clarification language. So there's a lot of cleanup work to do. Again, we have basically 9-page letter with 7 pages of comments, some that we've seen before and a couple of new ones. Part of our big issue is that they're fairly subjective, and so it's hard to understand exactly what HCD is looking for. But one of the big takeaways we got is Banning Ranch. It's very clear to us that they're not going to accept Banning Ranch, and so if we keep it in there and we count it towards satisfying our RENA, we believe that we will not have a certified housing element. So we want to ask the council, how do we want to address that? One other item we wanted to kind of go over here today, real briefly. In the Skag region, there's 197 agencies. 2 have been certified out of 197. In Orange County specifically, 0 have been certified. So I guess we're in good company, I would say. Everyone is struggling to make this work. Okay, so getting back to Banning Ranch, we've indicated 591 units on Banning Ranch, affordable units with total units of 1,475. The question is, if we can't count this towards our RENA, we need to move them elsewhere. So our first thought is, well, let's move them to all of the other study areas. We have 5 other focus areas, and the thought would be is to equally distribute those. And so this is what it would look like. So we're adding, this is the delta increases of affordable and total units in each of those areas. We feel that we do have substantial evidence of the sites to accommodate this small increase for each of the sites, and so we feel that this is a prudent approach. The question we really have is well, let's go forward and also look at what those total units are. But we thought, hey, let's leave Banning Ranch in there. We could still pursue it. And to the extent that we're successful in getting housing authorized and getting zoning opportunities on Banning Ranch, that would relieve the pressure to do it elsewhere in the community. So the thought is, well, let's leave it in there and pursue it. If we fail miserably on getting it in there, then obviously we have sites elsewhere in the community to create a housing opportunity sites list that meets the requirements of state law and satisfies the RENA. So looking at the focus area changes here, looking at the current draft, we have 10,000 units total that would be adding, and the new proposal, which would again redistribute those units to those other areas, but keeping Banning Ranch in there, It does increase the total number of units by about 1,500 units. So we wanted to basically note that to you and ask you, do we want to go with this approach? It is our recommendation that we go with this approach. The other option would be is to remove Banning Ranch completely, and then that would take those 1,500 units out of the equation, those units that are that we would want to leave in Banning Ranch. Really kind of the discussion that we wanted to go with today. We didn't want to get into the weeds on all those other comments that HCD had, but this was sort of the biggest issue because, we got specific direction from council to keep Banning Ranch in, and this is obviously a significant departure.
And with your input today, we will revise the housing element one more time and come back to City Council at the February 8th meeting for your approval of the housing element. We will forward that to HCD, hopefully for the last time. There's a high probability that they will not accept it. They're going to come back with another round of comments from us, and we're going to do this back and forth until we can get approval from HCD.
Can I
Thank you.
ask a question?
Yes, Councilman Dixon.
Thank you very much, Mayor. A quick question on that point, Simone and Jim. So if we leave the numbers in Banning Ranch, what is that, 1,700?
1475.
1475. But we also put affordable housing in the dispersed across the community. And we leave that number, so really we're over planning for affordable.
That's correct.
Do we get any bonus points for that?
I wish, but they just looked at Banning Ranch as zero, and they're not going to give us any additional credit. I think we can definitely, when we start addressing the overlays to start planning for all this housing, we can definitely put language in there to say once we reach our affordable housing thresholds, that we can cease the additional housing beyond that. So we can definitely put some triggers in there if that's what the committees, the future committees and the community would like to see. But we're not getting any credit for Banning Ranch.
And then one other question, and I'll let you continue. When you say then, and your chart said that no other cities except 2 have been certified, correct?
That's correct.
What do you hear from your fellow city planners? What kinds of action, legal action, challenges, resistance? What is the tone that you're hearing from the other cities?
I think right now everybody feels this in the same boat, that this has gotten out of control. This is the impossible task. This is a futile effort. With the Orange County cities, the other part of this is the state has formed a housing compliance or task force. This is an enforcement arm of HCD. They've had a Zoom meeting recently. They've actually talked about Orange County cities in their statewide Zoom meeting. So Orange County has the targets on its back. And I can't say that for the entire SCAG region, but this is almost a futile effort. Everybody feels like in the same boat. Those cities that have been through the housing process before, it was easier in the past to get certified. Everybody's saying that this is ridiculous. One thing that we haven't shared with the council yet, we have in the past, but not today, is there's an Assembly Bill 1398 that if we cannot get certified, HCD says we have to implement our adopted housing element by October, which is impossible for us because we have green light. We can't do it. So what does that mean with this housing enforcement unit? We don't know. This is all uncharted territory for us.
Okay, thank you.
Simone, before I hand over to Councilman O'Neill, what can they do, the task force?
Well, there is, I think they'll start off with just the letter campaign, notice of violation, saying that what's our plan to comply, right? I think that's what they were going to focus on first. Ultimately, they have fines under state law. They could fine us up to $600,000, but I don't think that'd be the first step that they would take. And then, of course, they can get their attorney general involved and file litigation. But I do think they're going to do that kind of notices first before they go to the extreme side.
What's the money that they're going to close our beaches first? Just joking. Councilman O'Neill.
Could you go to the slide that has the numbers? Yeah, that one. So, and I knew this was going to be a bad slide. This is a bad slide. What we've been trying to struggle with for years now is trying to figure out how to navigate the requirements. And I think we always sort of anticipated we'd be able to use Banning Ranch because I don't think we expected the state to do both a mandated housing element with this much housing, as well as also funding the acquisition of Banning Ranch to have open space. And I think it comes back to statements we've all, I think, at some point made, which has been, if you want open space, great. Just reduce the housing requirements. If you want housing requirements, okay, but you can't take away a large, like the last remaining open space for us to be able to put some housing, but it sort of seems like we've been put in the position of Banning Ranch not being available to us because, generosity of residents, of course, but also a lot of state funding. And I struggle with the idea of taking Banning Ranch out, and the reason for it is because if we end up in a situation where we are faced with an enforcement action, I don't want us to be in the situation where we have said, we said, well, Banning Ranch wasn't available, and their response is, well, you took it out voluntarily, right? Because we're not, even if we removed it right now, it wouldn't be voluntary. The threat of what we're looking at in terms of the enforcement mechanisms are draconian and aggressive, and they did it on purpose, which I understand. But at the same time, we can't realistically take it out and then put ourselves in a binding position down the road. Even if it's, I agree though that we can't keep it and then just say we're relying on that only. I appreciate the effort here. This is going to be pretty frustrating. I mean, this is a frustrating end to a difficult process. And it might not even be the end if this doesn't get approved. So I just want to throw that out there. Like, I'm looking at this right now. I mean, it sounds like a lot of cities and municipalities and jurisdictions are looking at it as a defensive posture position at this point, which is really too bad because there's been a lot of effort to find compliance, a lot of effort by a lot of different cities. And if we think we're in a tough spot, which we are, I mean, look at Costa Mesa with almost 12,000 units, and they've got essentially a green light in their code as well. So, look, I mean, if we're looking at it as a way, because the problem, last thing I'll say, a problem that we may face is one of those letters might say, what are you going to do to try to get rid of green light, the same way they did that exactly, the same letter writing campaign they did to Encinitas. And so if we're looking at this, trying to figure out how we're going to be able to respond with a way that protects the voter initiative on this one, I think you got to keep Banning Ranch in there as almost a defensive posture, approach. This is tough. This one's a tough one to swallow, but I understand. But I wanted to at least kind of lay out my thought process in terms of why I tend to agree with staff's first recommendation on that one, even though it's a tough pill to swallow when you see these numbers. Thanks.
Yes, Councilwoman Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a follow-up question. During the process, and Mr. O'Neill's aware of this, that we all are, that we've tried to find a way that we could say to the state, all the way up to the governor, if you're taking this land away from us to develop housing, give us some relief on the requirement because we're hemmed in by ocean, by open space, by a wildfire area, by an airport, and give us some relief. And we all know that there was no relief coming. But I do want to point out that staff did, and I think Councilmember Brenner did, reach out to our Assembly representative and I don't know if we reached out to State Senator Min. He really needed that support to be on the side of Newport Beach to advocate for us, and neither would stand with Newport Beach. So they stood with Banning Ranch against the city of Newport Beach, where we're trying, just as Mr. O'Neill said, we've all worked very hard to meet the state's requirements with no relief on finding where we could put 300, 400 affordable housing units. So I just wanted to say that on the record because we've tried to get our elected representatives to support our efforts. We want to build, we want to comply, just help us find the space to do it in. And we couldn't get the help from our elected representatives. Thank you.
True and sad story. Okay, any other comments from the dais?
Banning Ranch is what, 400 acres?
Correct.
And how many acres, I know we've gamed this before, would this many units of housing need?
At this
Roughly.
point in time, we'd like to see that there's, 30 to 40 acres there. We do believe, even with the Coastal Commission's most recent review back in 2016, they identified 11 acres, but, that was not a settled review. We believe there's more acreage out there, so, 10% of the land is pretty much all we would need to make this happen.
Right, and I just, from my perspective, that leaves a lot of great parkland and done correctly and sensitively. I just think a development like that is just not going to be materially detrimental to the public's enjoyment of all that open space. I think that's another important thing to remember. I think when people talk about Banning Ranch and we talk about housing there and they think, oh, it's just going to be covered. And the truth is it's not. And of course, where it goes, it can also make a big difference in that regard. So it's to be held up like this after all the effort with no compromise whatsoever is disappointing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Brenner.
I don't know how obvious this has been to the people that view our meetings or that come to our meetings, but you've said it, but I just want to say it as clearly as it possibly can be said, that the housing units taken away from Banning Ranch are going to negatively impact all the other parts of our city where we're going to have more development, more affordable housing in all sorts of places in our community. And I don't know how many of the people who contributed to the Banning Ranch Conservancy understood that there was going to have a negative impact on the rest of our city. We all love the idea of open space. We would like more open space in our city, but now that we've got this mandate from the city, it's going to negatively impact our quality of life in the rest of the city by not being able to do that.
Thank you. See no other comments. Go out to the public on this. Any comments on this item?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Charles Klob. So first off, you all have to know that there aren't going to be homes built on Banning Ranch for the simple reason that the owner is not interested in developing them. The owner has no interest in remediating the property for residential development. So placing those there, continuing this idea, seems to me to be giving a gesture to the HCD, which begs them to come back to us in a harsh way. My suggestion is spread them around as Simone has suggested. Add a 20% inclusionary. There won't be a run on the bank while we get it figured out. That kicks the can down the road and gives us a potential for HCD to approve it so that we don't get fined and we don't get made an example of. Secondly, a question, do either of Simone's proposals open us up to a potential lawsuit by housing advocacy groups? I'm not an attorney, I don't know, but that should be considered in my mind. Do either of those approaches make us more vulnerable? Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Please come forward if you plan on speaking.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Nancy Scarborough. I'm not going to get into the Banning Ranch thing. You guys have enough to deal with there. But I do believe that this puts us in a situation where we have to have a plan B rather quickly. And I think that we should have a plan for an immediate and effective inclusionary requirement so that we can take some of these units off the table. And I do believe that we should figure out a way to really push ADUs. It's not going to help us with the housing element that goes to the state because we've already been told that they're not going to consider that. But we could take some of our surplus funds and we could set up some way to loan owners of current ADUs and help them bring their units up to code and tick away at some of those numbers rather rapidly and reduce the number of affordable units that are remaining that we have to put on all these other places. It won't change immediately, but it will give us something to work toward that goal rather quickly and effectively. And we do have a surplus. We might as well use it for something that is going to help our housing unit, which helps everybody in the city, and it also gets HCD off of our back. It doesn't make us look like we're people that we just don't want to have any development. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Mayor O'Neill, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier.
Jim, is that on purpose? Are you razzing me?
I'd first say that was a very concise presentation on a very large problem. I spent this afternoon comparing the two letters that the city has received from HCD. By my count, in the first letter, they found roughly 30 deficiencies in the draft that we submitted back in October or November, whenever it was. And in the latest letter, 7 of those are no longer mentioned. So apparently we're okay on those 7 of their 30 concerns, one of which, oddly, was the impact of green light. They apparently are satisfied with the explanation the city staff provided to them. They did add one new deficiency, which was the request and reminder to us that we had not provided any substantial evidence that our housing sites would be actually used for housing. So by my count, that's sort of 7 down and 24 to go. So I think the chance that in 2 weeks from now, on February 8th, the staff will be able to provide you with something to adopt that HCD will certify as being compliant with state law is essentially 0. One of the themes I saw in both letters is they were emphasizing cities have a legal requirement to actively seek public participation, which in their mind is actively reaching out to organizations that represent low income and disabled people, and have to provide proof in our submission that we've actually done that. So I'm wondering, have we done something now to find proof of that? Are we planning to do it in the next 2 weeks? How are we going to meet that requirement? And then finally, this seems to impact an item on your evening agenda, item number 9, where you're going to restart the overall general plan update. And I don't think the director said it quite correct. If we don't have something compliant in 2 weeks from now, we don't just have to do it by October 15th, we have to redo the zoning to comply with RENA by October 15th. The zoning has to be consistent with the land element. That means the land element would have to be revised based on a housing element that we still don't know what will be certified almost instantly. So how are we going to do this overall general plan update? I didn't hear either of those exactly addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, members of the City Council. My name is Debbie Stevens. I'm just going to say that I'm just disappointed. There was a lot of work and effort that went into this, and as a member of the committee, it's just disappointing. But quick question to staff. Did you go over these points with HCD staff, like point by point, and try to figure out what are they looking for? To me, it looks like there's a staff member that's just sitting there checking boxes without understanding the details. Just my question.
I'll have them answer when you're seated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, we'll have a couple. Would you want to, Simone, tackle that one, and then, or Mr. Campbell?
Mr. Campbell.
When we do sit down with HCD, before both comment letters were issued, we did have an office conference, basically an hour long, where they went over and summarized the comments, and that gave us an opportunity to understand it a little bit, clarify a few points, and you know, it's hard really to gauge it. Now, are they just simply check marking, running a checklist? The answer is yes, they are. I would say our reviewer, he has got full support of a supervisor who seems extremely knowledgeable that we worked with in our prior housing elements. I think they are putting some thought into this, but they clearly have, they've got state law behind them that makes us do what we have to do. And so it's a combination of the two, if you will.
And I would say too that HCD is not a well-oiled machine. What they say on a conference call, which are very nice, very courteous, sometimes is very different than the letter that they issue. So we're dealing with an agency that is trying to understand their laws and trying to implement their laws, and they're struggling to do that too.
Very good. How about the lawsuit question? That was a good question too.
I'm sorry.
I think Mr. Klob asked about lawsuits from housing nonprofits.
Well, I don't know what from the potential litigation, but luckily we're not the only ship in the sea at this point. We have all the other 35 Orange County cities, all of the SCAG cities. We've made significant efforts on our housing element. Or I would feel like we've done an excellent job on our housing element, and not every agency is fortunate as we are. So if we're going to get sued, I'm sure everybody else is going to get sued too.
Okay, before we do a little straw poll, Councilman Dixon.
Simone, could you go back to the first slide? So what are we faced with to advise you this evening?
It's really, is this methodology sound for the council? Leave Banning Ranch units in play, assuming that they're zeroed out because HCD won't recognize them, distribute those units across the board as we've shown here, and that's the delta. Taking that 591 affordable units and just distributing it across all the other planning regions. And if the council is supportive of that, that's all we need for this evening.
But the question of Banning Ranch, point one, I assume we will do this to be in compliance. If we include Banning Ranch, we're not violating any law. We're not sticking a finger in anybody's eye. We're just saying we want to consider this as additional location for affordable housing. We want to do over and above what we're required.
You are correct. The only difference is that HCD sees 0 there instead of 591 affordable units.
I get it. But it's our city, and it's within our sphere of influence. And if we want to put X number of units there or think about planning for them, we can, right?
That's correct.
And we're complying with their draconian orders. I do want to say, just to echo Mr. Avery's point, just so that for public record purposes, going back to 2016 when the Coastal Commission unanimously denied Newport Beach the opportunity, and the owners, I guess it was owners, to develop that property. Of the nearly 400 acres, I think it's 395 or something, 90% of those acres would be devoted to open space. And we were talking about maybe 10 to 15% for some development.
Correct.
Now, and mitigation and remediation of all the environmental oil drilling aspects of it. So we as a city were never going to take Banning Ranch away from the open space idea. So just want to go on record that we believe both goals were possible, to meet our housing needs as well as preserve open space for the enjoyment of many. Okay, but just to be clear, if we keep with Banning Ranch as well as dispersing those units in the rest of the city, we are in compliance with what HCD is telling us, and they can't come down and find a reason to sue us for any reason.
For the planning for the affordable housing units, correct. For everything else, we're still working through it.
Yeah, all right.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Blum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments. We're talking a lot about the stick and what's happening if we're not in compliance and the ramifications. But I think it's really important to note that we are doing a better job than almost every city in Orange County with the thought we're putting into this, with the actual time spent, staff energy, real dollars and cents. And so even though we're not in compliance and we're not certified, it doesn't mean we're not doing a great job. And I think even Debbie brought it up. We put committees together, as Jim has asked. We put a lot of people, a lot of the community involved in these decisions. Staff has worked tirelessly. We're not behind the 8 ball on it. And I think that's really important to remember. If we're going to rank ourselves among the other cities of Orange County or the other cities of California, we're doing well. Just because we're not certified doesn't mean we're not doing well. And these comments aren't negative. They're just chances for us to find ways to figure it out or improve. And so I love the idea that we want to keep options open, but we're still willing to redisperse. So we're not going to lose Banning Ranch. We're not going to give up on it, even though it might be a futile dream. That's okay. Dreams are good. We like them. They give us something to look forward to and something else to fight for that might help us out beyond this moment. And if it works out, great. If it doesn't, well, who cares? So I love that staff's put this kind of spin on it. I think it's really important. And I think it's important for us to remember we are not the kids in the back of the class right now just trying to sneak through. We're actually doing one of the best jobs in the county, and it's important for us to remember it. So I just want to commend staff on the job they've done, the public for the time they've put in, and all the committees that have done this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Brenner.
I just wanted to mention regarding Councilwoman Dixon's remark that this is our city, that we do have signature gatherers here outside today that are trying to get signatures on an initiative to restore local control. Just information, not advocating. So, and the other question I have is, when Jim says that we were required to reach out to low affordable housing organizations, could our efforts with the homeless be considered reaching out to affordable housing people in order to try, and our permanent supportive housing efforts, that we actually are trying to find affordable housing in our city? It's not like we are sitting back saying, no, we aren't going to have it.
The answer to the question is yes. And all of our efforts were actually publicized by the Kennedy Commission, which is one way we got the message out to the broader community, to the affordable housing advocates, and to and the like. And so, we feel we've done an adequate job there. The question is, will HCD agree with us? We hope that they will.
Yes. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harp, we can't tell people they can come down to City Hall right now and sign this, right?
No, you're not allowed to use city resources in order to support a ballot measure.
Yeah. Even if it's going on during council meeting, you can't do
I'm
that.
not telling them to come. We're just telling them they're there.
Okay, I think that's all we have on that item. Oh, actually, no, we're going to do a quick straw poll. So we have two options. Put that option slide back up. It's pretty basic, but basically there's one with banning, one without. If you support leaving it in there but not counting it towards RENA, please raise your hands.
That's 6-1 with Councilmember Brenner
So,
dissenting.
Councilwoman, you would side with the remove entirely?
Yeah.
Great, very good. So staff has instructions. Thank you.
Is there anyone here from the Orange County Housing Finance Trust? No.
Looking forward to that.
Okay. All right, seeing that the study session item 2 is just not going to happen today, we will just go ahead and proceed on to public comments on agenda and non-agenda items. Please come forward if you have a public comment on agenda or non-agenda items before we go into closed session. Seeing none, Mr. Harp.
Thank you, Mayor Muldoon. The City Council will adjourn to closed session to meet with real property negotiator Simone Jurgis regarding the lease with the American Legion located at 215 15th Street in Newport Beach, as well as meeting with the labor negotiators regarding negotiations with the Part-Time Employees Association and Association of Newport Beach Lifeguards, all set forth on the agenda under item 4A and B. And we're going to ask that the council chambers be cleared because we're going to do closed session in here as opposed to in the back. Thank you.
Thank you. We are recessed until the 5:30 regular meeting. Call the meeting to order for the January 25th, 2022 regular city council meeting. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
Mr. Harper, is there a closed session report?
Yes, I have a couple of items to report on. In regards to the study session item number 3, the housing element update, there was a little bit of confusion about the voting, and Councilman Brimmer would like to be reflected with the majority on that, so it'd be 7-0 to include Banning Ranch as part of the housing element update, if no one objects to that.
I see no objections. Thank you.
All right, and then second, in regard to closed session item 4A, the real property negotiations related to the American Legion, Councilmember Brenner recused herself because she's a member of the auxiliary, and there could be a perception that she's biased, so she recused herself.
Very good. Now it's time for invocation. We have a special guest here, Debbie Moline, Director of the Center for Jewish Life at the Mirage JCC.
Good evening. I was honored to be invited to be here tonight, but full disclosure, I am not a rabbi nor a clergy person. So when I thought about what blessing I could share with this group tonight, I turned to the words of a rabbi who has unfortunately been in the news lately. 11 days ago, Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker in Colleyville, Texas, was held hostage for 11 hours with members of his congregation. And he reported after the ordeal that the prayer that repeated over and over in his mind was a prayer that we call Hashkivenu. It's a simple prayer that Jews often say at the end of the day at night, but we all know that even sometimes when it's still light out, we face darkness. This is the Hashkivenu prayer. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Grant, O God, that we lie down in peace and raise us up, our guardian, to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Guide us with your good counsel. For your name's sake, be our help. Shield and shelter us beneath the shadow of your wings. Defend us against enemies, illness, war, famine, and sorrow. Distance us from wrongdoing. You, God, watch over us and deliver us. You, God, are gracious and merciful. Guard our going out and our coming in to life and to peace evermore.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll have Councilman Dixon lead us in the pledge.
Yes, thank you. Please, you all rise and place your hand over your heart and salute the flag of our great country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, notice to the public.
The City Council of Newport Beach welcomes and encourages community participation. Public comments are generally limited to 3 minutes per person to allow everyone to speak. Written comments are encouraged as well. The City Council has a discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items.
Thank you. Now is the time for council announcements or reports from council members on committee activities and council members to place A1 items on future agendas. Councilman O'Neill.
Thank you. Big couple weeks for Friends of Newport Beach Animal Shelter. So I was able to watch them do the initial groundbreaking, which actually I guess I watched their initial destruction of the house, which was pretty exciting. And then a lot of us were able to be there for the groundbreaking. I was able to host a Girl Scout troop again in these chambers, have them come up here and tell us how they're going to improve the city. They continue to enjoy the idea of more police officers and firefighters, so that's good. I was named as the chair of the San Joaquin Hills board for the Transportation Corridor Agencies, and I appreciate the votes that my fellow board members made. We also had a homelessness ad hoc committee meeting. I'm guessing Councilmember Brenner will probably talk to that a little bit, as well as a Corona Del Mar Residents Association meeting for Council members Dixon and Avery. I gave an update on our subcommittees activities at redistricting. So there you go. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do have a slide. Yep. And then you've probably seen this in news, but the Red Cross reached out to us to help spread the message that there is a national blood crisis, the worst blood shortage in more than a decade. So this is not surprisingly being driven by COVID-19, which has caused a decline in the number of people donating blood, as well as blood drive cancellations and staffing limitations. And the low blood supply poses a risk to patient care, and actually, in worst case scenarios, forces doctors to make difficult choices about who receives blood transfusions and who has to wait So eligible donors of all blood types, especially O and probably especially O negative, are urged to make an appointment now to give blood in the weeks ahead. This month, there's an extra incentive, which is apparently a chance to win a getaway to the Super Bowl, all the way up in Los Angeles on February 13th. Everyone who donates blood, platelets, or plasma in January will automatically be entered for a chance to win. Unless you're from San Francisco, apparently you're not allowed to go anymore to the Rams Stadium. You can schedule an appointment with the Red Cross Blood Donor app or at redcrossblood.org, which, by the way, there is a blood drive at the American Legion on February 7th, so I won't be eligible for that, but for the Super Bowl, but I will be donating at that blood drive. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilman O'Neill, you're going to be at the blood drive. Which one?
On February 7th at the American Legion.
Great. Thank you. Councilman Duffield.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm very pleased to finally announce, after a lot of hard work and many, many years, that we have received from the federal government $8.3 million, which kind of tops off what we needed to finish and complete the dredging of our harbor to its original design depth. And this brings the total federal funding to around $15 million, and in which will allow us to get started within the coming months. I would hopefully at the end of summer. And it took us more than 20 years to get here. And I'd really like to thank all those involved. I know our councilman, former Mayor Brad Avery was a big help in this thing, along with lots and lots of others. But on the side of the California elected officials, Ken Calvert was big. Diane Feinstein helped us a lot. Harley Ruda. Michelle Steele actually pushed it over the finish line for us this last few weeks. Dana Rohrbacher was involved, oh gosh, way, way back there. And finally, Alex Padilla. And so those folks really came through for us. You really, they don't do stuff for us, but they actually wrote letters and followed up with whenever we asked them to help us achieve some sort of communication. You just can't believe how complicated this is. If you knew how many agencies were involved, you'd say, well, why would you even start it? It's really a challenge. And so, especially our local staff, our guys in the trenches here, Chris Miller, Dave Webb, and his team, man, they never gave up, and we're beset with problem after problem after problem. But, they came through. So it's possible. Not sure if it will happen exactly at the right moment, but, my original goal to be elected on this thing was to do this. And, 20 years ago, they told us you can't dredge at all, nothing, because of eelgrass. You might remember. But it looks like maybe before I'm out, we'll get the lion's share of it done. But it looks probably I'll be off the council when it's completely done. Anyway, I appreciate you listening, and thank you guys for our staff for all the hard work you do. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilwoman Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, many of us were at the groundbreaking for the animal shelter, the Friends of Newport Beach Animal Shelter, who is a sponsoring organization. I just want to take a moment to salute them, and also another amazing example of a successful public-private partnership. And so the donor community, the Friends of the animal shelter, have raised, I think, close to $3 million. They're just a few $100,000 short of their total goal. That $3 million has bought the land and paid for the demolition of the current structure that was currently there, and then all of the design, architectural design, and construction. So the land, design, and construction from a private entity source, the donors, the Friends of Newport Beach Animal Shelter. And then at some point in the future, that facility will be transferred over to the city of Newport Beach. So that will be their gift to the people of Newport Beach for a state-of-the-art, world-class animal shelter in the city of Newport Beach, a no-kill shelter. So it's going to be a wonderful facility for all of our four-legged friends. And the city will continue to operate it just as we do now with our animal control personnel within the police department, as well as city operations. So this is a gift that will continue to live on and go on living for all the animal lovers in Newport Beach, and we're very pleased with this exciting project. Also, for those who follow the Aviation Committee, we had to cancel our meeting this past Monday because we cannot do Zoom anymore. We're not under an emergency order, and so we couldn't meet. And so our next meeting, hopefully, we'll have more comfort level about meeting. Some of the members were uncomfortable, so the next meeting will be February 28th. Now I'm going to, do I have a slide on this? Is John Pope here? I'm going to just update where we are on our new refuse program. I don't know if there is a slide, maybe it's coming right now. After the new refuse contract was passed at our last meeting, CR&R and our Public Works Department have been hard at work preparing for the launch of the new state-mandated organics program to recycle yard waste and food waste. Newport Beach residents will be receiving new green top organics carts, just as you see here, starting next week, February 1st, and the rollout will continue through the end of March. Everyone will also receive a recycling guide with detailed instructions on the new program. I actually have, well, there have been several issues of the guide. I have it taped to our kitchen cabinet, so we know what we're supposed to do. We follow all the rules. If you would like to find out when your organics cart will arrive, go to newportbeachca.gov/recycle. At the top of the page, you will see a green box with a search function. Just enter your home address, and you'll be able to see when the organics cart will arrive. So our great programmers here at City Hall have linked in that connector with your home address, and you can get the information you need. And while you are on that same web page, you can scroll down for detailed information on the new program and a list of frequently asked questions. Trash and recycling collection days are also changing in some neighborhoods, not all, beginning on February 1st. CR&R has mailed out a letter, which will be arriving in the next few days, to households who will have a different collection day. So if you don't get a letter, then your collection date does not change. In the meantime, you can also go to newportbeachca.gov/find my collection day to find out if your collection day will be changing. So as we all know, we've been talking about this day for quite some time, and it's now beginning. So practice saving your organic food waste. And actually, Dave, where are you? When is the little kitchen bucket going to be delivered?
Yes, thank you. They'll start bringing that in February too, and talking to residents about the rollout.
Okay, because that's where you could collect your daily food waste and then take it.
In the meantime, just put your waste in the trash, black can, until you get your green can.
Okay, that's the official word. But we're in a major behavior change, all of us, and we'll see how well we do. Hopefully we will. I'm sure we will. All right, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Councilman Brenner.
Yes. Let me just add on to what Diane was saying about the recycling. CDMRA was concerned about the fact that we needed to have compostable bags in our garbage that's going to have the organic waste. We can't use regular plastic in there. So one of our members, Jackie Whitmire, went to Mark, the owner of Ace Hardware, Crown Hardware, and they are going to be stocking the biodegradable bags in all of their stores so that you can have something to actually put your food waste in so that it can be thrown directly into the trash can. So that will be helpful of them, and they're anxious to partner with us on that. Mark Schuline. And let's see, the other thing is on the CDMRA meeting that Will mentioned, redistricting was the topic, and CDMRA, I recused myself because my district could get changed around possibly, so Will made the presentation and they took a vote in support of map number 1, which we're going to be discussing at our next meeting, I believe. The road work in CDM, the city has done a great job of notifying the residents in Corona Del Mar that PCH and Marguerite are going to be closed intermittently for road work and resurfacing. And we got those bright colored cards on our door hangers, and I've seen several announcements from John from the city. So hopefully everybody's getting the message that we know it's inconvenient, we're sorry, but it has to be done. So thank you, Dave, for that. Let's see. I've been getting, I would say all of us have been getting a lot of emails about the homeless situation. And as Will said, we did have a homeless ad hoc meeting last week, I guess it was. And all of the messages, it's so interesting when you get messages from the public and they say, somebody needs to do something about this. And you're going, well, I've personally been working on it for 3 years. I know we all have been spending money and doing whatever we can. It's not an easy problem to solve. But at our meeting that we had, it was almost 2 hours talking about all the things that we're doing and trying to do and want to do. And I would just like to ask if we could put into the record, so it would be reflected in our minutes, Tara Finnegan's report that she did in December 2021 about all the different things that we are doing. It's 4 pages long, and it's all the different things that we are doing to try to help solve the homeless problem. It probably will never be solved, but it's not because we're not trying. And I love it when we get messages from people that say, do your job, solve the problem. So, you know, it's a bigger problem than we can solve, but we actually are working really hard on it. I've even met with several of these people and suggested that they might want to get together just as a citizens group and look to see what they could do. Maybe they can buy land for our permanent supportive housing project like the animal shelter people did, and allow us to build the project that we would like to build, but we can't find any land for it. So I do think it's a problem that we all really have to work together, and we are trying our best here at the city, and our city staff is doing everything that they can do. We did find out at that meeting, it was sort of interesting that a lot of people, I think, started emailing us because they saw all these new tents around town in various places. And we found out at that meeting that one of our residents had actually bought those tents for people because it was cold out. And, we had our brief bout of winter. And so, I think that brought it to everybody's attention even more that there still is a problem. But we also found out at this meeting that from the point in time count 2 years ago to now, there are only 4 people that were represented in both of those counts. So there have been a lot of successes, but there are also people that, continue to come into our area. So I just think Tara Finnegan is doing a great job, and I really appreciate everything you're doing to support all of our efforts. Thank you.
So the waste separation issue has reared its head at the Avery household, and we decided we would just try it out before the cans came to see how we did, and we 3 cans in the kitchen, plus I put an open container on the counter for the food waste, and it caused marital strife because neither one of us did a good job of, putting the right thing in the right can. So I think by the time, hopefully we're at the end, like in February, for getting our cans. By that time, we'll be ready to go, I think. My problem with the food waste thing on the kitchen counter, it had no lid, and it just, didn't look. Plus, it was the wrong color, so I'm hoping that we get a selection of colors for that container in the kitchen. Thank you. But seriously, we are looking forward to it, and I'm really, I think it's a good thing that we all work toward producing less trash, and so I think the idea of so many of my neighbors, yours truly included, we have 5 trash cans, and so to get that reduced down to 3 would be a really good thing for everybody. So we're going to do our best on that. Since our last meeting, I attended the Finance Committee meeting, and also I'm on the board of the Orange County Sanitation District. attended that meeting, and to Joy's discussion, I also was attended the Homeless Ad Hoc Committee meeting, and I concur with Ms. Brenner. We have an incredible group of folks that are working on this every day, and the Ad Hoc Committee, our discussions, the meeting went long, and we were getting into many different aspects of it, but there is an awful lot of work. But I totally understand people's frustrations with the tents and with the appearance of no progress, when I think at least we're holding the numbers at bay, I have a feeling, because of the good work. But it is absolutely troubling to see people on the streets in our town, and by no means do not want people to not contact us and inform us of what they see out there, where tents are, and they have every right to complain about this. And that's what we signed up for here, is to listen to people, and but also inform them that we are working hard on this issue. And there's a few things in the offing that we hope will limit the amount of homelessness and get people on the road to getting permanent supportive housing. And that's just going to take some time, and we're going to have to work harder and keep our expectations low, and keep pushing. And I think that we'll get to some level where we can feel better about it, because it is human suffering. That's the key thing to remember about everybody out there, in my view. No one's on the street who are not suffering. So that's important. It was great news that Duffy had about the dredging, something he's worked hard on. I've been happy to support that. We made 2 trips to D.C. I think the first one was 4 years ago, and met with a lot of folks, and a lot of the people that Duffy mentioned, the electeds. And in the beginning, it just seemed like it was an impossible road, but it just pays to show up and to keep knocking on the doors and talking to the representatives and working toward it and pushing. And I'll have to say, just Herculean work by our Director of Public Works, Dave Webb, and Chris Miller, just incredible. Just pushing us, we're pushing them, they're pushing us, and it's going to happen, and it's going to make a big difference in the harbor, not only for boats that aren't going to be aground in their slips and different places in the harbor, but certainly on water quality, because a dredged harbor, the water flow becomes greater, and the exchange of water becomes greater, and it keeps the water quality, improves the water quality greatly, as we saw with the last dredging. So it's very, very important, and it's great that it was a kind of a real surprise to get that much, and so part of it's timing, but Mr. Duffield led the charge, and I commend him for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Blum.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the unique pleasure of heading down to Agate and Balboa Island when we had the ferry close, because as our Director of Public Works knows, anytime there's heavy machinery in a giant hole in the city, I want to either get in it or drive the machinery. He didn't let me this time, sorry, Dave. But we put one of the large vaults in as we're undergrounding, and if you've never seen what it takes to do that, it's amazing. The dewatering rigs, the filter systems, and then the size of what we're actually putting in. And in Balboa Island, it's extremely amazing, because anyone that lives there or has property there knows that if you dig a hole in your garden, it'll fill with water. So it is quite a feat to be able to put these huge concrete vaults in. And since the city has taken over the undergrounding, it's been amazing how efficient it's been, how quick you see it coming through. And I mean, it was amazing that we could only have the ferry closed for such a short period of time and get it back up, and it's out of control. Balboa Island's already looking better. I know Dennis back there is thinking the exact same thing. So I want to commend our public works staff on really, I think when we had an outside company doing it, like South Coast Edison, not that they're not the most efficient company in the world, it took a long time and kind of became something that was really difficult to swallow. And now that we've seen the city take it over, it's just become amazing. I also got to attend the Finance Committee meeting. And it's been one of my favorite committees to be on because as we talk about all these other issues up here, homeless, changing our trash cans, I think it's important to remember that we're able to do that. We're able to deal with our irritations because we don't have major problems in this city because it's so wonderfully run. And I would love to give Will, Brad, and myself credit for sitting on that committee, but I often say it might be the most boring committee because they do such a good job at it. And Scott usually just reports how great we are. And so it's wonderful to see, we're efficient, we're strong. City staff has been unbelievable with it. And we're able to really focus on things like homeless task force and rolling out better programs for the citizens because we don't have that problem. And we're much more fortunate than a lot of cities in Orange County that are not in the same point we are. So I really commend them for that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I believe Councilwoman Brenner had something more to report.
I failed to give information out about the point in time count for the homeless. And I didn't really know what it was, so I called Natalie Bosmasian, who is our homeless coordinator, and I believe Will participated in this a couple of years ago. But I wasn't sure what it was all about, and you may have heard people talking about it and not know as well. But HUD from the federal government provides funds to deal with the homeless issue. One of the ways they do that is they go through the county and they give out money based on your count, how many homeless people you have in your city. So it's supposed to be once a year. It didn't happen last year because of COVID, but it's going to be February 22nd this year. And there are 2 shifts that people can volunteer for and different assignments that they can register to work on. And it's being done by CityNet, our homeless company, the corporation that we work with. So, now I'm wondering where the website is. Oh, okay. County of Orange contracted the agency CityNet to complete geographical. Well, now I can't find the website that I was wanting to give you, and that was the main reason so I'll still look for it and get it back to everyone.
Thank you. First, I want to offer congratulations to Tara Finnegan, who is now the Assistant City Manager, which if you watch The Office, it's not assistant to the city manager. She is the Assistant City Manager herself. Congratulations on the promotion, well deserved. And we have a planning session this Saturday. Where's that being held? Here at City Hall. The council will be holding a planning session this Saturday. It's an annual session. It'll be January 29th from 9 a.m. to noon in the council chambers. I encourage our residents to participate by attending the session or watching live on our web stream. This is an annual planning session where council hears reports and updates from several of our department directors and provides direction on funding priorities for next fiscal year budget. We'll also be focusing on homelessness as part of that, in addition to capital improvement projects, specifically which ones will be prioritized for the next fiscal year. You can view the meeting live at www.newportbeach.ca.gov/NBTV Live. NB like Newport Beach, TV Live. And another website for you, this is from the one that Councilwoman Brenner was referencing, www.everyonecounts.org/about, and that provides the point in time count map for the county for those struggling with homelessness. Lastly, I also attended the Friends of Newport Beach Animal Shelter groundbreaking ceremony, I should say. Very impressive who's been involved, and as a council, we're honored to be asked to be in the picture and participate in picking up some dirt. But I'll tell you, it really was the organization and the volunteers much more than a council. We're happy to support, but you've done us in the city a huge service by taking on this task. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. This is now matters which council members have asked to be placed on a future agenda. The one we're considering today is submitted by Councilman O'Neill. He's asked the council to consider an extension of the revocable license agreement dated October 1st, 2014 between the City of Newport Beach and Kobe Inc., which was later assigned to Pacifica Christian High School for the use of city property located at 1499 Monrovia Avenue. Can we have a show of hands supporting this?
It's unanimous, 7-0.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, please read the notice regarding public comments on consent calendar.
This is a time in which council members may pull items from the consent calendar for discussion. Those are items 1 through 8. Public comments are also invited on consent calendar items. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record. If any item is removed from the consent calendar by a council member, members of the public are invited to speak on each item for up to 3 minutes per item. All matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and will all be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. Council members have received detailed staff reports on each of the items recommending an action. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the City Council votes on the motion unless members of the City Council request specific items to be discussed and are removed from the consent calendar for separate action.
Thank you. I'll be pulling item number 8. Councilman O'Neill, do you have any items to pull from the consent calendar or conflicts to announce related to items 1 through 8?
None.
Thank you. Councilman Duffield. Councilwoman Dixon.
Yes, Mayor, item number 3, I had to recuse myself for property-related issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Brenner.
I have the same issue with item 4 that I need to record a recusal.
Thank you. Councilman Avery.
And I will be recusing myself from item number 10 due to membership in New Harbor Yacht Club.
Okay, anything on items 1 through 8? On the consent?
Yeah, number 10 is on current business.
It is on current business?
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, but just double checking. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Blum.
I have none.
Thank you. You know I pulled 8. Do you have a motion?
I do. I'd like to move the balance of consent with the proposed changes to the minutes, notating a recusal by Councilmember Dixon on item number 3, a recusal by Councilmember Brenner on item number 4, and item 8 pulled by Mayor Muldoon.
Thank you. I'll second. Okay, we now have public comments on the consent calendar. That's items 1 through 7. Seeing no one come forward on items 1 through 7, do we have additional council comments on the consent calendar items? Seeing no council comments, let's vote.
Prior to reading the vote, I'll read the ordinance titles for items 3 and 4. Ordinance 2022-1, an ordinance of the City Council of City of Newport Beach adopting Local Coastal Program Amendment LC 2019-2 to amend Title 21 Local Coastal Program Implementation Plan of the City of Newport Beach Municipal Code related to hedge heights in front setbacks abutting stratas in Lido Isle. Ordinance 2022-2, an ordinance of the City Council of City of Newport Beach adopting revisions to Zoning Code Amendment CA 2019-6, amending Title 20, Planning and Zoning of the Newport Beach Municipal Code related to cottage preservation for consistency with the California Coastal Commission's modifications, and Ordinance 2022-3, accepting California Coastal Commission's suggested modifications and adopting Local Coastal Program Amendment LC 2019-4 to amend Title 21 Local Coastal Program Implementation Plan of the City of Newport Beach Municipal Code related to cottage preservation. The motion carries unanimously 7-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item 8, which is pulled by myself. Mr. Miller?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Chris Miller's here, project manager on this item, to give you a quick update if you like.
Yeah, we'll take the long update, please.
Take the long one, okay.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Chris Miller, Public Works Manager. And I'd like to give a brief summary of the events that led us here this evening, and then I'd be happy to elaborate any further or to answer any questions after that. At the City Council meeting in May 25th, there was a comprehensive discussion of the Lower Newport Bay Confined Aquatic Disposal Construction Project. And the City Council certified that EIR. They adopted the Mitigation, Monitoring, and Reporting Program made facts and findings, and approved the construction of the confined aquatic disposal site. After doing so, the City Council directed the Harbor Commission to continue to explore the privately funded option or other alternatives within 90 days and return to the City Council with a recommendation. The Harbor Commission, via their subcommittee, helped facilitate the dialogue between Team Palmer, who was the private party interested in providing disposal alternatives. The subcommittee was facilitated between Team Palmer and the city. Team Palmer requested some more time, and the Harbor Commission had a comprehensive discussion that they considered at their October 13th meeting. There was a thorough discussion, and including planning input from Community Development Deputy Director Jim Campbell, who provided some information on planning and permitting. And ultimately, the Harbor Commission voted 7-0 to disband the subcommittee and to recommend to the City Council that they believe that the CAD is the most viable and cost-effective solution with the most sufficient timeline. And the Harbor Commission recommends that the City Council not consider the alternatives analysis. So that would be my summary of why we're here and how we got here today. I would be happy to elaborate further on the high-level points of what the Harbor Commission considered, or to answer any questions.
Thank you. So first, what I'd like to do is, before I invite the Palmer team to come forward, are there any questions of staff at this time from the dais? Okay, seeing none, would you please have a representative for the Palmer team come forward?
I'm Palmer.
Hi. Yes, we all know. Yeah. Mr. Palmer, or Mr. Palmer, Mr. Lucky, I'd like to offer you 10 minutes to present. You can present the same fashion at Harbor Commission or however you see fit. If you want more time, please let me know. Then I'll ask staff to respond some, and you can respond as well.
Absolutely. I'll try not to use all the 10 minutes. I think that I probably won't. I appreciate the heads up that this was happening. I will say I didn't know it was happening until this weekend. Of course, it's a courtesy that I even got notified, so I'm not complaining, not acting like I should have known earlier. You mentioned presenting the same way that we did at the Harbor meeting, and I don't want to be. I'm not the type of guy who's a professional victim. I try not to be a complainer. What was the Bible verse? Do everything without complaining, without arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, something. Anyway, my mom always taught that to me growing up, mostly the without complaining part. But one of the things that stood out is we had a couple minutes, or no, we had more. We had I think 3 minutes and 10 seconds to talk about what we were doing. At that particular meeting, I think prior to the meeting, we had made a proposal for what we were doing. We had sent it over to the Harbor Commission. What we didn't know is that it had been sent on to not only city staff, but also on to Anchor, which is the contractor that is been basically leading this whole process through CEQA, putting together the plan, will likely be doing the long-term monitoring of the proposed CAD. And so we showed up to give a presentation. We got a few minutes. I don't know the exact count, but Anchor ended up with a much longer presentation where they said some things that were true about our plan. Some of parts of it are difficult. Some of it are not necessarily easy. Some things that were not really so true, saying that our analysis was flawed on the volume, that the only way to do what we were proposing at Lower Castaways would be to make a 60-foot tall mound that would tower above the highway. It's one thing to say that our numbers are a little bit off, but their analysis seemed to be that they were really off, that we were really wrong, that we had not only not done the best job, but done a really, really terrible job. Now, I'm going to admit I am not a sediment expert. It is not my expertise. But I am a man of business, a businessman, and I'm pretty good at delegating to people who are pretty smart. I have confidence in the people that I put together on the team. We've hired a variety of firms to work on it, including ones that have worked with the city of Los Angeles and with San Diego on not identical but similar projects in the past. I'm pretty sure our analysis is not that off. If it is, I'm not married to it. If the presentation we put together really is so wrong, then absolutely we should throw it out and be done with this. My ask is pretty simple. I think that this hasn't really been looked at neutrally by all the parties involved. I think that a lot of people have an interest that is less than neutral. And believe me, I appreciate that there's been a lot of time and a lot of money put into getting the funding for the CAD, getting the funding for the dredging in particular. I want the harbor to be dredged as much as anybody or more. I'm right there on the harbor. I really want it. The last thing that I want to do is delay things or slow things down. So my ask is pretty simple. It's actually a whole list of asks. One, I would say, because of the fact that none of us want this to be delayed, none of us want anything wrong to go wrong, I would ask that, one, it'd be great if we could have a different third party take a look at the plan that we put together and tell us if they think that it is totally crazy and as bad as Anchor thinks it is. If maybe we can find a third party, a firm that typically works with this stuff, I'll pay for it. I'm not asking the city to pay for anything. I'd ask for just a tiny bit more time, just to have someone check the numbers. See, will there be a tower above the street? Is this just a totally impossible solution? Or could it be that maybe it is actually more possible than some people would have you believe. The second thing I would say is, if the city is going to consider, as the staff recommends, not considering the analysis that we've done and not considering any further analysis, it'd be great if they could wait a little bit longer to take that step. As it is right now, the CAD hasn't been approved by Coastal Commission. There's a few other procedural things that it needs to go through. The last thing that I would want to see, and of course, this is me believing my plan works. So, even if you think I'm crazy, give me a little credit. I'm working with what I got. I believe that the plan we put together for disposing at least a significant amount of this material at lower castaways would work. And what I would hate to see is for that plan to be rejected now, for the city to vote to not consider any more alternatives, to not consider our analysis, and then for the CAD plan to become unviable for other reasons. And now we're left with no backup plans, no alternatives, nothing that we could even fall back on as kind of a far possibility. There are some limitations to it. For example, it's been pointed out that we would not necessarily be able to handle as much material as the CAD could in its ultimate version. That is a totally valid thing, but I think a lot of the other analysis was not correct. And I will remind everyone that the alternative to the CAD that was proposed in the CEQA process was a smaller CAD. And I think it should be undisputed that the lower castaways could handle at least the amount that was previously marked as a viable alternative, a smaller CAD that wouldn't be able to handle all of the material that everyone wants to handle. And it feels a little unfair to me, where on the one hand you have people saying, we got this thing, it won't handle the whole problem, but it's still a viable alternative. And then on the other hand saying, this isn't a viable alternative, it doesn't handle the entire thing. So I guess that's what I'm asking. One, if you guys are going to not consider this or vote to no longer think about it, I'd ask you to wait a little bit longer. Who knows? Maybe a world is going to come where it would be good to have another backup on our plans. Two, it would be great if we could have a third party take a look at this stuff, and if the city has another firm that they like working with that doesn't have a vested interest in this project and in it being done a certain way, I'd be happy to pay them whatever their almost certainly obscene rate is, and get a third party analysis. And if they tell me that, as Anchor said, that our plan is totally unworkable, that it's not possible, and that it's going to be this big monstrosity, I'm going to back off and I'll say, man, I really wasted a lot of money trying to do what I thought was the right thing, and you won't ever hear about it from me again. I don't think that's going to happen. That's why I'm willing to make that kind of bet. With that, I will stop talking for now, and I don't know if any of you guys have any questions for me. And again, sorry I didn't bring a formal presentation.
That's okay. Yeah, I understand you were given notice on Saturday. That's not a very short notice. Public's giving notice generally on Thursday. So to get notice a couple days before council is kind of obscure in my opinion. And
that would be that's a reasonable opinion. Most of the time the notice I get from the city is more like the street sweeping truck is driving down the street and I run out to my car. So, getting a few days of notice is lovely.
Okay, great. You're a genteel man. Okay, Councilman Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that. So let me just understand what you're asking. I understand you want an independent analysis of your plan, or comparative analysis of the two plans.
And I would say I wasn't even actually thinking comparative. I'd be happy to do that as well. My goal here is not to pay an external consultant to badmouth the CAD plan. Something and I'll say this again, I don't think the CAD can't possibly work. I just think that it is not necessarily the best plan. I've said that from the beginning. So I'm not looking to have a consultant give their opinion on why the CAD is bad, but I was hoping that we could get an independent analysis of why the plan that I guess is called Team Palmer has put together for Lower Castaways, and tell us what they think of it. And it could be that there are problems with it, but I suspect it's not to the extent that others have said.
Well, I guess I'd frame it, my own thought process, if it's not a comparative plan, you really would like an independent analysis of your proposal, and if there are some deficiencies, what would cure those deficiencies?
Yeah, and I'll note, I think it's actually pretty reasonable to argue that even the people I have hired are independent in that they have no stake in the CAD. They haven't been working on it for years. They don't stand to make any money from monitoring the CAD in the long run. So the people I've hired are, in my opinion, pretty independent. But of course, there are also people that I picked. And so I don't know if the city has another firm that they work with that doesn't have a stake. It feels like we could say, hey, let's have another third-party firm that maybe you guys have worked with in the past. I'll pay the bill. And let's do a comparative analysis, see what they think. Because remember, it shouldn't be too hard to figure out if we're wrong, because if we're wrong, then man, we are really wrong. I mean, the feedback we've gotten is not you're a little wrong. It's you're really, really grossly wrong. You didn't do the math right at all. And so we should be able to figure out if that's the case very, very quickly and easily.
Okay, so if that is a viable plan or alternative parallel path, we just announced tonight we're getting this dredging funds from the federal government. So just to state again, your idea to have this independent analysis would run in concert with going forward with the Harbor Commission plan, and this would not delay the dredging and the access to the startup of the dredging activity? Is any way in conflict with our new dredging program?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we should be able to absolutely run this in parallel. As far as I know, the plan we've put together, it's not formally submitted to any government agencies. It's not under any kind of EPA consideration or submitting anything. Now, there could be problems. For example, suppose it is a viable plan. Maybe there are valid criticisms, like it can't get through the permitting process as fast enough. That's possible. It's possible that, especially at this date, it's not possible to get it through as fast as we would like. But that's a separate issue from whether or not it's viable at all as an alternative. Sure. And what I wouldn't want to do is say, we think we probably can't get the permits in time, therefore we're going to write it off. And then it turns out that it was the only solution that we had because of other things outside of our control. I'm certainly not hoping that the dredging gets delayed, but I've dealt with the government a bit myself.
Okay, so that would be a question that I have, that we don't delay the dredging. We have the funds and want to make sure that the process, wherever it is, and we'll ask staff to update us on exactly where that process is. And having a backup plan I could ask staff this, to your knowledge, is there an alternative plan? This is the only plan that we've only talked about, the city's plan. There's no alternative plan.
I'd have to hand it over to you guys, but I think actually the backup plan was it's CAD and then smaller CAD is the filed backup. Do I have that right?
Actually, we can go a little deeper on that. The backup plan, there is CADs, but the one that's in the EIR, you saw several alternatives in the environmental document in May. And the top-rated one is the CAD, and that's the one that's being proceeded forward. I didn't know we wanted to talk so deep tonight. I'd like to go, if it's okay with you, to have Chris go a little deeper. Mr. Lucky can see that, because there was a lot of detail. I took the liberty of sitting through the Harbor Commission that night and watching staff in the presentation. And as probably several of you can appreciate the fact, when you have two consultants, two lawyers, anybody in the room, there's a different story and there's two things. But we did have Jim Campbell there, who looked at it from a coastal permitting standpoint and made a ruling that the plan they're looking at is not permittable. But Chris, could you do me a favor and go, we had a couple slides and I want to show you the plan so you have a little more context before we have this discussion.
Which plan is not permittable?
We're going to get to that. If you'll give me just a couple slides, I'll show you.
Hold on. Are you done with your questions?
Yes, for now. Yes.
Okay. Ms. Palmer, do you have anything else you want to say before we go back to staff?
Sure. I've read through the analysis. I saw the meeting myself. No, I'll reiterate what I said earlier. I think we got a very short window to present. I think there was a lot of preparation on the other side about our presentation. Some of the criticisms, absolutely valid. I'll grant you that. There's a lot that I don't think was valid. And so we could sit the two people and go back and forth and have someone say, I think this isn't permittable. And then someone says, well, I think there actually is a way. And they say, well, there's no precedent. And they said, well, there was 20 years ago. And then you say, well, that was a really long time ago. And that's a process that can take probably more time than we have at the meeting tonight, which is why I'm trying to make my ask pretty simple. Even if you think that our thing is a long shot, let's say it's a 1% chance in your reckoning. I don't think that there's a lot of value created by voting to not consider our assessment or to not consider alternatives further. It seems like it's really, really low risk to just say, I'm going to kick the can down the road and not really have to do anything except Palmer's going to pay someone that we picked to get paid to take a second look at this. It seems pretty low risk to me. I'm the only one who gets kind of somewhat screwed by the process.
Okay, great. If you want to stick up front, Mr. Lucky, I might call you back.
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Mr. Webb, take your time.
Yeah, why don't we just go, Chris, I want to go a little deeper, and there was a lot of moving parts in this, and actually you have several harbor commissioners here, and they can speak to this because they formed a subcommittee and actually drilled down, and I don't want to take too long on this. Could you go just real quick? So we're familiar with the dredging project. Here's our first slide. The first portion, the phase, is done. The applicant actually asked for us to look at three options. If you go to the next one there, Chris. The first site they looked at, and they were, again, this is where we had some concerns, but this is up at Jamboree right next to Fletcher Jones. This is a designated wetlands. It's not a permittable site to basically fill. And again, their consultant may have overlooked this. We checked with the region board. We could not put dredging spoils in here as we understand it. This was verified. Jim Campbell's not here tonight, so I'll just kind of paraphrase what he said, but we couldn't get a permit to do this site. And I know this is not the preferred one, but that's how it started. The next site they looked at was this hotel site. It's basically designated and to be built as a hotel site. It's not owned by the city. It's held by another, I think this is a county site actually. And again, they looked at this site. They didn't see how it's feasible to do it, especially, remember what we're putting in here is dredge spoils, and it's not really good building material. There'd be a lot of remediation, other things. So this was, again, not their preferred site as I remember it. Where they're looking at tonight is the next slide with lower castaways, and this is where they focus their attention. And the two consultants looked at this. There was a good time presentation. I don't think it was 3 minutes. I think there was more on that. And then the Harbor Commission met a lot. So in looking at this site, Team Palmer came up with a plan, and we really appreciate, believe me, that the amount of work they put into this was great. And I thank you for doing this and your consultants. And it takes time to go through this, but on the other side, that our consultants, even staff, looked at this and just said, is it doable or not? So if you turn to the next slide, this is the tentative plan that they proposed, and what this shows you, and if you're not familiar with this, this would be a tentative, real high-level grading plan where they're taking the dredge spoils and they're building it up against the natural bluff there, and you see all those lines. Those are basically contours as you build up. So what we looked at have to happen here, remember, dredge spoils are silty sand and very sloppy stuff. They'd have to add some kind of binder to this, most likely cement. They'd have to compact this and build up a slope to basically compact this dirt in here. So there was just the physical idea of doing this, and this is where Mr. Campbell said he doesn't even think this is permittable because behind it is coastal sage Esha, and it's also a coastal bluff, which our LCP doesn't allow us to do such work against. The other thing you start taking into consideration is it takes up a lot of the area of lower castaways, and there's some policy questions that the Harbor Commission didn't take on that weren't even addressed, like would the city want to give up half its property to put dredge spoils on and then devalue the property? We have other ideas. I know the Park Beaches and Recs talked about it. This is the last owned parcel by the city on the harbor. The Harbor Commission's interested in doing things. So we take about half the property and put spoils on it. And again, I appreciate that it's not even fully done here. You'll notice those lines go all the way down to the bay. We'd have to, if we did something like this, we'd still have to probably massage this because it blocks off access to the beach down there. Fish and Wildlife would not allow that as you go up towards Dover Shores there. So there was this discussion that took place. I think the Harbor Commission took into account the cost. Let's say the two experts agree the cost is about neutral. I think this actually costs a little bit more is what our experts showed because there's more handling involved. But let's even say there's a cost neutrality here. The policy questions is, does the city want to give up its property for this? Does that slope, which would be a cementous slope, it won't even grow vegetation, is that something you want to see from Coast Highway? I think those conversations are in the back room. This doesn't take all the fill sites. site. And as one of the conversations we had, the EPA is allowing us to take a higher level of material out to the LA6 and dispose of it, provided we take care of all the remaining soil in the harbor in the federal channels. If we don't take care of all of it, as they told us, then our level goes down. We end up with a lot more material we have to deal with beyond this. The other way their consultant showed, and again, I don't have a slide for this, but all along Dover shores, they wanted to take the remaining material and put it on the base of the shore. Good idea and concept. They thought, hey, they'll buttress the slope. It'll help the beach there. The problem with that is again, it's this fine material. Are you going to have to just let it sit there and be able to wash back into the channel over time? Or are you going to add cement to it and make it a kind of a hard material on top of the beach? The things we know is that the Corps won't permit that because you can't put fine material on a beach. It's got to be like for like material. We deal with that on our beaches all the time. So it's probably not permittable. And two, you probably don't want this hard material on there. Fish and Wildlife uses that beach for shore fishing, recreation. We'd have other problems in the permitting process for that. So it's not as easy as it looks there. That was one of the concerns that came out that I saw on this particular slide. Again, cost, trucking, a lot of other issues on that. Was there anything else that I'm just going off memory here, Chris, from when I was sitting there, but am I missing something with this discussion?
I think to emphasize the timing of the project as well and how that fits in, I'd be happy to talk about that with the Corps' upcoming project. And also to reiterate what the EPA, Dave mentioned about the EPA's guidelines for sediment disposal. And they were very serious about we would have to provide a home for more material, for other material in the harbor, for them to relax the standards down to 1 part per million for mercury. I think that's a very important point.
And I would say that I know the Harbor Commission. I wasn't on the committee, but Ira Beer is here who led that, and they spent a lot of time giving to Mr. Lucky's comment that they only got 3 minutes. I think it was longer than that, but I think, and you could speak to that, they spent a lot of off time without staff working through this. So I think it was carefully considered. I recognize our consultant had a different opinion. Even in staff, we don't always agree with our consultant. I recognize Jim Campbell may say, yeah, I can't permit this, and maybe their consultant says we can. But again, the picture's worth a lot, because then there comes to a policy question for the council. Do you want to give up half your lower Castaways property, even if we can permit it, even if it's the same amount of money? Is this the type of use you want on that property? And we still have to figure out what we do with the rest of the material. Those are questions we didn't even get to. The one last thing I know too, that when we dig out the CAD, we're taking out sand material. There's about 250,000 yards of sand that comes out of that CAD, and it's going to go on the Balboa Beach, which is a nourishment project. That's not in the calculations either. That's just money that we'll end up having to pay later to mine sand off the ocean bottom to backfill that. So there's other benefits that we didn't even talk about really in this conversation. And again, I'm sorry, it's a fast picture, but it's not an easy thing to talk about. If we want to have a whole detailed discussion on it, then we probably ought to go back to those meetings, or at least review it and have the 2 consultants. I'm not afraid of a 3rd consultant, but it's a very complex thing. I don't know if the outcome will change. So we do have a time constraint. So I'll just offer those thoughts to stop here.
Very good, thank you. The sand that you're going to use to replenish, we're going to get that sand though from the dredging the entire harbor, I imagine.
So only a portion of the material in the bottom of the harbor now is able to be used. And you'll have to give me the volumes again, Chris, that's actually going to be recovered for sand replenishment.
To the material that would be recovered and used in the nearshore zone along the ocean beaches, that's the material that we would need or dredge for the CAD, and that's about 60,000 cubic yards.
Mm-hmm. So the reason why I'm allowing this hearing to happen is because I don't appreciate the answers I got from the consultant last time. I had some very clear, concise answers. He wouldn't give me a clear answer. That makes you question the motives. Then I hear that, no pun intended, the team's been sort of sandbagged, if you will, given last-minute notice. I read this push report. It's this push report. Sorry, it's the DA. I read this staff report really brief. It's much better what you just presented. It explains more. I'd like to hear their rebuttal to some of those thoughts that you shared, and then I'd like to tell you why I think it doesn't hurt to try for 2 parallel paths. Mr. Lucky, would you like to respond to any of those? Specifically, my question would be about the accuracy of the depiction of the ground contour, followed by the hard material additive they claim you need to put there.
So I'd have to have the consultants that I'm paying speak to it really specifically. I know that we had a few mitigation ideas for how we could do that. Like one way would be to add a hardener to the surface, and that would definitely preclude certain plant growth. But I think the way it was presented was basically there's no way you can do this and have plants grow. There are actually other ways you might be able to treat it. And now, I'm not saying that these are cost-free. For example, you can do sediment sorting where you can say, I'm going to sort some of the fine sediment versus some of the thicker grains, and I'm going to use the thicker grains that are going to be more suitable for a certain area. I'm going to put the finer grains in a different part of it. I guess one thing I'd also throw out on terms of, do we want to give up half of Castaways Park? I think actually the way that we had presented it, there is some portion that becomes no longer traversal area. It definitely is not half. So the area up at the top was definitely planned as that could be park area that would be accessible. The lower area, the plan there was that it would be still accessible. Part of the plan was also rebuilding the seawall that is currently there. And I think everyone we've talked to agrees it's going to fail in some number of years that's less than 20 years. And some people say 2 years and some people say 10 years, but everyone agrees it's going to happen at some point. And then of course there's multiple ways to do that. You could build a retaining wall, you could rebuild the wall. There is a cost question as this stuff. But what we didn't like was this idea of, the only way to do this is to basically spray concrete all over the hill. There are other ways to do it. They might be more expensive. We haven't done the analysis on that. We could do a little bit of analysis there. I guess the two final things, what were they? I had them in my head. Give me one moment so I can access my memory banks. Okay. The one last thing that I would note, and this is only a little bit related. I saw it was mentioned in a previous meeting that originally we said we were going to present plans for how we were going to get rid of this sand entirely, and we were going to move it completely out of Newport Beach, and I was going to use it for my own purposes. And comments were made like, "Hey, this isn't what Palmer said he was going to do. Why is he presenting these ideas where it's in Newport Beach?" And I do want to say that wasn't because that wasn't because I was saying something that I didn't intend on doing. But one of the very first things that happened in our interactions with the ad hoc Harbor Commission Committee was that we were directed that what we wanted to do, and I won't get into the specifics. You can come drink with me sometime, and I'll tell you if you really want to know. But I did have a way to completely remove it from the equation, but I was told that it would probably not be viable for reasons for reasons that are not necessarily financial. But anyway, I want to make clear, we were just following the direction of the commission, which was, hey, we probably can't just take this sand and go bring it to a faraway place and do stuff with it, even if that was a legal path, because there's other potential concerns. So I'm just throwing that out there for anyone who wonders how a proposal to take it outside of Newport turned into a proposal to keep it inside of Newport.
That makes sense. Well, and I think the commission might be right on that assertion.
I think so. Anyway, that was all. I think that's all that I have that's directly relevant to that. I know some of my consultants are here today, so if any of them wanted to chip in on any of the relevant things, I think they could probably during the public comment period.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Lucky. We have some
Thank you
questions
all
up
so
here as
much.
well.
I'm sorry.
Question, on this slide, is this your proposal or somebody's taken yours and modified it? I mean, does this
It's
represent
possible that
what
this has
you are
been
doing?
slightly modified in some way, but I'm not 100% sure. This is at least based on a proposal. I'm not sure about the origin of the
But
document.
what you just said to us now verbally, you're saying that all of this horizontal lines, the scaling would not exist. This is not a true representation of your solution.
Sorry. I don't know the exact ordinance document. If it sounds evasive, I'm sorry. I've been through 2 federal trials all the way to a jury verdict, and people ask me, and you made this document, right? And there's been a lot of times where I've said, no, that's a slightly different version. I don't know exactly which version it is. That grading is actually there. What I'm saying is there's a flat area up at the top. There's still the area at the bottom is in fact brought up and arguably made more useful in some ways. What I'm saying is you don't have half of the site becoming unusable. It's just it's differently configured. There is some portion that would become unusable. Much of it is already unusable and unwalkable. And so I would challenge it takes half the property and makes it not usable for other purposes idea.
I guess it would just be helpful to see something that's more of an accurate reflection of what is usable and what is not usable.
So we actually have some drawings and sketches, and I think we paid somebody to do a little watercolor painting of what it would look like. I unfortunately do not have those at this instant in time, but I would be happy to send them to you.
Okay, all right, thanks.
All right.
For the record, those federal cases were civil.
Yes, not criminal.
Yes,
They were both civil, and
Yeah.
I won both of them by unanimous jury verdict. So.
Okay.
No, wait, that's not true. I won one of them by unanimous jury verdict, and then the judge threw out the other one. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Is it okay if one of my consultants come?
We'll tell you what.
Diane, I just want to answer your question specifically for that drawing right there, since you asked it. Yeah, that was our drawing that we put together, but it's strictly conceptual. So, where we were in the charge and what we were trying to do to help the city evaluate alternatives was see if, you took this 100,000 cubic yards around and you put it places, does it fit anywhere? And it actually fits at Castaways. We were kind of moving towards that design phase, but the first idea was to come back to you guys, minus the Harbor Commission and that sort of thing, and get to you guys and let you know that we did the investigation and we found 2 places where we think you could put that material. Now, the one question that hasn't been asked, and I don't know if Councilman Duffy knows this, or if Public Works knows this, but is there any timestamp on that federal funding? Because if there's not, and that federal funding can be extended and still be used, then there's a potential that you guys might have a better option than just burying this stuff and that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is get to a better option here. Our process of going around was just a fitting exercise, literally fitting volumes to spaces. And so, we went through a bunch that didn't make sense. Obviously, Public Works found a few that didn't make sense. We all agreed those don't make sense. But Castaways actually does make sense. And that's why I think Palmer, is really kind of saying, hey, look, if you don't trust our analysis, and you think that, and there's some questions, that some of the homeowners have about the city's analysis or Public Works analysis, then maybe a third party to look at that would verify some of that. Our intent, and quite honestly, this is straight from the heart, we were not trying to be adversarial in this process. We're trying to help the city make a good decision with a really, really hard-earned, blood from a turnip that these guys went and got. So, thank you.
Okay, I just have
Yes,
to
sir.
clarify. So
Yes, sir.
is this what we're looking at? Is this the key issue that you have found a third site? It may be disputed by the Harbor Commission and Public Works, but you believe there is a potential way to put the material here in some configuration, some way, some can be planted, some may not.
Yeah.
But you feel this is the site, and you just want more time to refine that idea further.
And quite honestly, we would have been to you guys in August, but we did not ask for the time extension. The time extension was granted by the city to us in what we think was time for them to prepare a rebuttal for the information that they were starting to see, which is that there's actually a couple viable spots here. They're not going to be easy. Nothing's easy about dredge material management. I can tell you that for sure. Mr. Capolino over here can testify to that as well. Is Steve here? Where's Steve? Oh, I thought he was here. But there he is. Excellent. Yeah, so he knows a lot about this stuff too. Nothing's easy about managing sediment. It's always a challenge. Everybody wants to dredge. Nobody has a place to put it, right? So that's always the challenge. So what we were trying to do was help the city, investigate if there were, mainly to help the homeowners have some confidence that the process was followed through, because there were some questions in CEQA. And I would push back on the city and say, Public Works, and say, this did not begin in April or May. This began at the very first meeting where everybody showed up, and the discussion there in CEQA was not that we were going to talk about different alternatives. We were going to talk about the alternatives they presented to us and how we felt about them. Right, like that was the first CEQA meeting. There wasn't a list of alternatives. There wasn't a whole bunch of different options. Here's a CAD, here's a CDF, here's upland options. None of that. It was CAD, smaller CADs, and no option. And that was kind of the decisions there. So, and that's what prompted the homeowners to really say, you know what, was this done? Is this right? Like, are these the only options? And that's what spurred this. And that was at the first Harbor Commission meeting, the first CEQA public scoping meeting, where public was allowed to show up and ask questions. Every time a CDF, which is kind of what this is, gets brought up, it was always, Port of Long Beach isn't available anymore. Well, we know that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Lucky, do you look at Coyote landfill or anywhere else, or this is the only spot you're focusing on? Oh, wait, do you look at Coyote landfill or anyone else outside of these 3 spots, or are these the only 3 spots you looked at?
Yeah, I think that we initially were looking at 11 spots. We selected it to 8 that we did site surveys for. And actually, in our report to the Harbor Commission, we actually had a written report that showed the other 8 and listed why they wouldn't work. Most of them were terrible ideas. So It's not like there were 11 great ideas. There were 11 bad ideas. Then there were 8 pretty bad ideas. And then there were 3 that kind of made sense. Lower Castaways was the only one that actually made sense in the end by our estimation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry for being a pain in the butt, guys.
Mayor Pro Tem Blum.
Just real quickly, and I'm not going to get into whether it'll work or what the costs are going to be, but a lot of the people that are upset about where the current CAD is tend to be homeowners near the CAD. Is that a fair assumption, we think? Okay. So the site we're proposing here is flanked by homes on most sides, by new developments and properties right across the water on the other side. So it begs the question that won't those homeowners have the same issues that you guys have? And then wouldn't this process be drawn out through the same process? And then there's another struggle here that this being in the coastal zone and this seeing an appeal to the Coastal Commission, which is highly, highly likely at this point, by these homeowners, this project at this site seems very, very, very improbable. Not that it can't be built, but that merely the process of getting this done with other concerned homeowners, just like you guys in Newport Beach, will clearly have an issue seeing this across the street from themselves, especially that this will be deemed a landfill, and that's how it will be reported. And so I love the creativity, it's great, but it's hard for me to understand how we can solve one problem in Newport by moving it to a new place in Newport where we have the same proximity to residents that will have the same concerns that you guys do. And, I appreciate you bringing up the points about outside of the community. And I don't necessarily think it needs to go so far outside of the community like the previous plan. But are there other options outside of this community that you can bring back if that's the desire, rather than really shifting it to another area within Newport Beach where it may actually be closer to residents because it won't be under a huge amount of water. It'll be in their view at all points. So, that's really, I think, the main question I have asked. It's not about feasibility. I believe that anything in this world is feasible. We can do anything. It does come down to, do we want it? Do we want to take a viable piece of land that could be an amenity for the community, something that's great, that helps with property values around? And then I also have to ask that if this went here, I think it would adversely affect property values around it, especially in some of those homes. But then I asked if the CAD, do I really believe that it's going to adversely affect property values on Lido Island? And I have to say, I'm hard pressed to believe that that would slow buying for some of your beautiful properties out there. And I think from a community standpoint, that's really the question I have to ask. We can look at a lot of alternatives, and I appreciate the time, energy, and money you put into this. Believe me, I do. And I sit in the same idea of you as this is business, and let's find a viable solution that works with a good business move. But this seems like bad customer service for everyone but the people who don't like the current CAD. So if we move this to off of one of the most iconic bridges in Newport Beach that looks over the harbor on both sides and can be seen, it's just, there's a lot of unknown unknowns going on with this proposal rather than the known unknowns we have with the CAD. And I think, as a risk mitigator yourself, I think you're probably familiar with what I'm saying. So I appreciate all the work you guys have done, and by no means do I want to skirt any of these ideas, but I have to look at all sides of this project and not just, is it possible, but is it good? And if it's good for you, but bad for others, I don't know that it's necessarily our job up here to decide on for one and not the other. And that's kind of how we've come to the CAD. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Duffield.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, how many cubic yards total of this material needs to be disposed of? The total cubic yards?
From the federal channels, there's 106,000 cubic yards, and then we've accounted for 50,000 more cubic yards for our residents and even the city to dispose of material that's unsuitable for ocean disposal.
Okay, and so how many cubic yards is on the screen right there?
As I understand it, that according to Team Palmer, they are saying that that could accommodate the approximately 100,000 cubic yards.
Okay, so we're a little short?
We would especially be short of the material that is part of the deal that we have with EPA and the regulatory agencies for taking care of other folks within the harbor.
Isn't that kind of a big deal?
Yes, because.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions from the dais? Okay, we'll go out to the public, and then we'll come back with probably some more questions, and then I think there'll probably be a motion or two. Our public comments, please come forward.
I'm Shauna Councilman, and I am one of those unfortunate homeowners on the tip of Lido. I don't like to make the assumption that just because I'm here and I care about that bay, it's because I live on Lido. I may be more informed than a lot of people who use that bay because I do live right there and I witness it every day. So the assumption that I'm worried about my property values is a little bit offensive. I am not worried about my property values. I am worried about the health of our bay and what we're dumping in it. So every time Chris talks about this great recovered material that we're going to put out on our beaches, remember that that is the healthy material, the 260,000 cubic yards, and I quote you, Chris, on that, of healthy material that you're going to take out to the bay and remove from our anchorage in the harbor. The anchorage where people drag their anchors every day, all day long, all night long. Most of them inappropriately, don't know what they're doing. Capped by 3 feet of clean sand, and you think that's going to protect the, what I'm assuming could be 260,000 cubic yards of unsuitable material in one area in my clean bay, in your clean bay, in everyone's clean bay. Because it's not just myself or my friends who use that bay, it's everyone in California. It's people who come and travel here. So to choose that spot in a residential community is inappropriate. And when asked by Mayor, or you're not the mayor anymore, Councilwoman Dixon, when Anchor QEA was asked if there is another viable site like this in a residential community, he quoted an area back, I believe, in Minnesota. I went home and researched that. It is so far from a residential community that I can't believe it. It is commercial, it is open land, and it is in the middle of nowhere. It's not in Newport Beach, California. This is a pristine jewel that we have, that we get to enjoy every day, that we invite thousands and millions of people to enjoy. And to damage it, to choose to damage it, is inappropriate. I thank Palmer endlessly for all of his work and all of his efforts. It makes no difference to our homes. I get that. But it does make a difference to our water quality. And I believe you're going to see that in that it hasn't even passed through the Water Quality Board yet. It's still got to go through Coastal Commission. So when you talk about timelines, maybe we should talk about that. So in using Brad's words, I'm going to show up and I'm going to keep knocking on the door.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. And Harbor Commissioners are welcome to speak as well.
Mayor Muldoon and members of the City Council, Bill Kenny, current chairman of the Harbor Commission. We did study this at length, as you've heard. One of the things that you need to take into consideration is the fact that Councilmember Duffield, our staff, our consultants have worked for years to raise the funds to allow the city to dredge in conjunction with the federal government. There is a very short window of opportunity for the city to dredge with the federal government. If we don't do it at the same time, the city will never be able to afford to clean up the bay. This project has an environmental impact report that you have certified. If we go to a different site, we're going to start the environmental review again, and we may not meet the timeframes necessary. We've raised $15+ million to allow the city to finally clean up the bay. The staff, the consultants, Councilman Duffield and others have been able to make provision to allow private homeowners to clean up contaminants under their docks. If they don't have the opportunity to do that in conjunction with this project, they could never afford to get those contaminants out of the bay. If we don't do it now, those contaminants will be in the bay, and every time a boat goes by at low tide, prop wash is going to churn it up, and that stuff is going to go all over. We gave the Team Palmer plenty of time to study alternatives. We think we conducted a fair analysis. Commissioner Beer is here this evening. He was the chair of that ad hoc committee, and I'm sure he has some additional comments to make. But we really do think that we gave them a fair analysis. We reviewed it. Our recommendation stands. We think that this city council should move forward with the CAD in conjunction with the federal dredging. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mayor Muldoon and council members, thank you. I'm Ira Beer, Harbor Commissioner. Really what Chair Kenny described, I'll only add a little bit to it. But before I do that, I want to mention, if it's okay, that I want to comment on Palmer's comment with respect to sort of, for lack of a better phrase, dictating what path they follow. And initially, yes, it was presented at the commission meeting. Mr. Palmer presented a concept of removing the material, using it for either a construction site, selling it, or getting rid of it to another country, actually. And that all sounded great. I, myself, actually reached back out to city staff, discussed that a little bit, the viability. There was some pushback on legalities, not to get into all that. And my objective was to just be a conduit for information, so that if Team Palmer would come up with an idea, my goal was to vet it out so I could get the information back to him as quickly as possible, so that if there was a problem that city staff saw, he had the opportunity, his team had the opportunity to mitigate that. I was doing everything possible, so I really apologize if I gave you the impression that that I was trying to dictate a course that you should follow.
I was just trying to explain why the plan we presented wasn't the one before, because what I heard was not an accusation, but confusion.
Understood. I just wanted to be real clear on that, because that was very important to me, that I took that information and got feedback. So I won't get into the minutia. I want to talk about three key elements that need to be satisfied. And one of them certainly is money, okay? The second one is the amount of material that we're dealing with. And the third one is, can we get this thing permitted, reasonably speaking? So the first issue, which has been addressed by everybody, but I really want to hit home on this, is the money. So currently, if we do the dredging, if the city does the dredging in conjunction with or just subsequent to the federal channel dredging, we're saving over $1 million by not having to remobilize. That's number one, right out of the gate. But more importantly, if we miss this deadline and we can't properly dispose of this material, we then lose the concession provided to us by the EPA to put unsuitable material that has a mercury part per million of 1.5 versus 1.0. My understanding is that that will represent over an additional 100,000 cubic yards of material. Mr. Miller, ballpark, is that about right?
You can continue.
Thank you, Mayor. That's almost double the entire project, so the costs are millions of dollars more. So the magnitude of the amount of money is serious when it comes to what a delay could result in. The second aspect is the size. And one of the conditions that we put out as a commission and me as chairing this subcommittee was that whatever alternatives are presented needs to address the full scope of the project. That is 156,000 cubic yards. And that is part of the concession that's being provided. So what you see up there purportedly would cover 100,000 yards. I'm not an engineer, but the commission does have one of its commissioners as an engineer who calculated that out to be substantially less than 100,000. But say it is 100,000, whatever area that takes up, it's still short 56,000 cubic yards that we have to do something with. And there's currently no viable alternative for that I've seen. The last piece of it is the likelihood that this gets permitted, and that's been discussed. Experts have looked at it, much more knowledgeable than the commission in its entirety, and they are saying pretty clearly that the likelihood of that getting permitted is very remote, and if it did, it would take a very, very long time, which circles us right back to the money. Okay, so all this money's been put together, all this time has been spent. As Councilmember Duffield mentioned, started 20 years ago. We first had our meeting at the commission, I think 10 months ago, and we've continued to work as best as possible to see what alternatives there could be. But at this point in time, and as I mentioned last, at that Harbor Commission meeting, after Palmer spoke and made the suggestion that, hey, let's look at other alternatives and I'll pay the bill. So the commission voted to ask the council to approve that draft EIR, and the vote went 6 in favor and 1 abstain. I abstained because I felt it was important to allow the opportunity to see what these alternatives are, especially if it's going to be not at the cost of the city, and maybe there's a better option. So it went down that road. We've come to this point today, and clearly for me, it's extremely compelling that we need to continue down this path, get the CAD done, and make sure that we don't jeopardize the money, the environment, dispose of this material, and make additional material, unsuitable material, available for disposal to the residents, the commercial businesses, and even to the city extent as well, where there's unsuitable material we're going to have to deal with. So that's all I have, unless anybody has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beer. Any other speakers?
Mayor, Council, thanks again. This will be my last time up here. A few things that I wanted to, points that I wanted to clarify. First of all, the extra 50,000 cubic yards that's referred to is uncharacterized and it's not identified in the CEQA document. So you will have to get permitting on that outside of this CEQA document. So even though they account for it and they say, we want to put 50,000 cubic yards in there, the EPA, the Army Corps, and the Regional Board will have comments as to what you can and cannot put in the CAD, which quite honestly will leave a lot of homeowners who have significant levels of DDT unable to dispose in the CAD, similar to the failed RGP 54 that's going on right now. Helps a few, doesn't help everybody. Those people who it doesn't help really doesn't help. But let's go to why it's important to hedge your bet on this. Okay, so we all know what the Harbor Area Management Plan is. That's something that the Harbor Commission is actually supposed to implement. Well, the Harbor Area Management Plan, I had a good fortune working on back in 2008 to 2010. And there's actually a whole list of acceptable models for water quality impacts and that kind of thing that's in that plan. Well, that was not the model used in this evaluation. right? And the reason why they say those specific models is because of the sensitivity. Newport has, shallow areas and deep areas and islands and all sorts of stuff. So the flow is just a little bit different there. You know that from the tsunami. You guys didn't get a whole lot of effects in the tsunami. Back into Port of LA, 5-6 feet. So the flow regime in Newport is just a little bit different. And so the Harbor Area Management Plan dictates which models you can use. It wasn't used. What does that mean? That means that the CEQA water quality analysis isn't sensitive enough, right? It's not sensitive enough to meet the certain requirements. Is there going to be contaminants released during construction? The issue is not when the CAD is sitting there. The issue is when they're dumping this stuff in the water and the DDT plumes that are coming off, which even the unsensitive model says will happen. There's no samples. We've talked about this before. No samples. To think that it's just going to be a cakewalk to permit this and not permit something like that is a faulty argument, because you're talking about real water quality impacts here. With no samples, the wrong model. So basically flawed CEQA analysis, which means that your permit could be kicked back and said, go back to your monitoring and reporting requirements, go back to your analysis. So that's why it's important. We want to give you guys an option so that if there is the chance that you don't get, approval through the board and through the Coastal Commission, that there's something to fall back on. So that's probably the most, I'd say compelling argument for the folks for doing that. But let me bad modeling leads to bad impact assessments, which ultimately leads to permit delays. That's how that process works. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other speakers? Please come forward.
Jason Pitkin, Newport Beach resident. I wasn't going to say anything until Noah brought up the NIMBY argument. And as somebody who doesn't live on the harbor, right now, most of the residents don't know about this. They don't know that this is going on. But if it were to happen that you were digging a hole in the turn basin to bury all this stuff, then you're going to get tons of phone calls from all kinds of people all over going, oh my God, you're burying this toxic material in the middle of the turn basin. And everybody's going to think about how over the summer, when that boat drug its anchor and unleashed that pipeline and spilled all that oil in the ocean, isn't a similar thing going to happen in the harbor when boats are dragging their anchors, going to expose the CAD and release some of this toxic material that will then spread throughout the harbor? And it won't just be the local people that are exposed to it. It would be everybody: jet skiers, boaters, swimmers, paddle boarders. So it doesn't just affect the people that are living close. I guess the other question is, why don't the suits want to have an alternative that can be considered? In terms of the permitting, so many times do we do exemptions to the EPA permits if we want to build a football stadium or whatever. It seems like burying toxic material in the middle of the harbor might be a good reason to do EPA exemptions. Obviously, they're motivated by money. That's a beautiful coat you have there. It's is that cashmere? Maybe not. It's almost as nice as Will O'Neill's suits, but clearly they're motivated by money. And but I just wanted to bring up the point about it not just being an issue for the Lido Island residents. It'll be an issue to all of us who live in Newport that use the harbor and don't want to be exposed to this toxic material that's going to be buried in the middle of the turn basin. Thank you.
There's Pitkin. I think he meant staff is motivated by saving money. Thank you, staff. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, I'm sure we have some requests to speak up here at the dais. Since I don't see any immediately. Where are we right now with the Water Quality Board permitting?
The Water Board has deemed our application complete, and the application is under consideration.
Consideration to grant a permit?
Yes, they're reviewing our application, yes.
Okay, and after, if they were to say, here's a permit, we grant you a permit, what happens next?
Well, we also need to have a Coastal Commission permit and an Army Corps permit as well. So 3 permits from the regulatory agencies.
I'm not as worried about Army Corps of Engineers. I might be wrong on that. But if either one of those two first entities were to deny the request, what do we do then?
Well, I don't have an answer for that right now, for a contingency plan, but.
Well, that's exactly why I support looking at another plan. I support continuing down the path we are. We might get success with Water Quality Board, we might get success with Coastal, and I imagine we'll get success with Army Corps of Engineers. But I believe that for us to timely pursue the federal dredging funds to match it with the overhead, which no one's refuting, that's the common goal, it would make sense to have a backup plan. Whether or not the sediment makes its way all at this location or part of it goes to the Coyote landfill, time will tell. But I think our staff, I think you are competent enough to make something happen. One of the reasons why I wanted there to be a hearing here is because when we first addressed the issue and we had Anchor present, and I asked about the toxicity, thank you so much, for Mayor Pro Tem Blum. The toxicity of traveling through that water, if it were to be brought up by an Anchor or perhaps during the process, they wouldn't give me a straight answer. So many residents of Newport Beach, they do have concerns about water pollution. Obviously, there's components about that in my backyard as well, but I think we can all agree that we want the water to be clean as possible. If these two entities are going to sign off on it, probably means for the sake of human exposure, it's going to be safe. If they don't sign off, I would like a backup plan as a way to deal with this and to dredge the harbor. I really appreciate Team Palmer's effort in this and his offer to pay a third-party person. Based on my dealings in public forum with the vendor, I think a third-party person would be invaluable to assess any criticism that was made by that vendor, and also to I guess bolster our parallel path, which is what I view again the Palmer plan as being as a safety plan or something that we can travel down as a parallel path. So I will make a motion to approve continuing through with the CAD process, applying to the Water Quality Board and Coastal Commission, and for staff to continue doing what they're doing, while at the same time heading down a parallel path that would be a very quick review by an independent third party that both Team Palmer and staff sign off on to confirm or deny claims made by the vendor about Team Palmer's submission. And then I imagine that Team Palmer's submission is not going to be as far off as it was claimed. So I imagine that process would then lead on to exploring the permitting process at the viable alternative location, which we might need if we are denied by either the Water Quality Board or Coastal Commission.
I second that motion. Yes.
Thank you. And would you like to comment, Councilman Dixon?
Please. I support that motion because I think we do need a backup plan. I mean, there's uncertainty. Do we have any risk factors, risk analysis on the Water Board, the Coastal Commission, and EPA? Have we been approved by EPA? Has this plan been approved by EPA?
You approved an EIR. There's just something I'm going to follow up with Mr. Miller on. These are permits we're applying for. All these regulatory agencies or permitters also reviewed the environmental document, and they have the rights to comment and put comments in, and they put their comments into that. So they also commented on the CAD, so it'd be unreasonable to say, now we're not going to approve a CAD even though we approved your EIR for that. So the thought of not getting a permit is a risk, and I understand where you're going, Mr. Mayor, but it's a low risk. We should apply on something that we've already done a legal process, had public hearings on an environmental document, which has been approved and seen by those agencies. They should follow through with the permitting. I would also note in the Coastal Commission guidance, they also actually, and Chris can talk to that, make reference to the use of CADs because they look at that as a good way to handle some of these dredging problems we have. A lot of cities have these unsuitable material, and they have to find a way to do it. And the Coastal Commission recognizes the CAD might be a solution to that. One last thing, just for the record. We talked last time, the material is not toxic. One of the speakers talked about toxic material, and that was well documented and shown. Because it has mercury and other elements in it, it's not at a level of toxicity. I've always talked to the folks that we have more of a paper problem. The regulators say, at this point, you can't go here, you can go here. But it's funny, these same regulators, when I sat in the meetings with the EPA in San Francisco, they said, the material's fine. It can stay on the bottom of the bay if you want. We don't have any problem with that. But if you're going to take care of it and they want to go to LA3, for instance, only this level of material can go out there. But you can leave it on the bottom of the bay. Or you can put it in an aquatic disposal, which they would recommend we do, and take care of it that way. And again, it's not toxic to material. It's kind of like scraping up the bottom of the bay, putting it in a hole. I mean, there's a lot of talk tonight. I apologize for that, but I just want to make sure the record's clear on that. One last thing I also heard a comment on. We did extensive outreach, if you may know, when we talked about in the public hearing. I remember going to many yacht clubs with Chris. I sat through Lido Island, whole island meetings talking about the CAD. So it's not like this is not known to the people of the harbor. We've talked about Island and yacht clubs. A lot of people know that's out there, and this has been explained. So just to make sure the record's clear, people do know it, and it's not toxic, but there may be an alternative path. There's always a risk that a permit might get hung up.
Okay, just let me finish my questions. Okay, so I think having a backup plan at no cost to the city, frankly, I mean, to have the independent evaluators determine, I think neither is a good solution. I don't like what this could imagine to be look like, although I don't think I like what it's there right now. It's a maintenance yard and it's not attractive. I would like, if anything goes there, if that becomes the alternate site, it has to be vastly improved from a landscaping. It can't be a wall of cement. So anyway, I guess I should be talking to you. It can't be a wall of cement. It has to be an attractive. It's a park, so it has to blend in terms of a green park. I just wonder, after these many years of you going through these steps, if it's not toxic, I believe you, why cannot we put this out in the ocean? I know you've explained there's a number, there's a limit to what can be put in the ocean. Have we exhausted all avenues to put this 156 or maybe just 100 into the ocean? And we'll find another place, a smaller place, and lower castaways for the 56,000 cubic yards. Have we exhausted and using our congressional influence or whatever we need to do?
I think we've gone a significant way. Exhausting it, I'm not sure. I know what we started at, let's say 1 part per million. That's the level. We met with the EPA in San Francisco. We actually met with the head of the EPA in Washington when Mr. Duffield and Mr. Avery were there. And we got them, I think that's what moved them to say, well, you can put 1.5 out in the ocean. And I don't know the science behind it. There's a lot of mass balancing and things like that. But they were real hard about 1.5 as far as we can go on that. Now, different voices in different parts of government. I sat through a meeting and the Corps of Engineers staff said, it's good, all it can go out there. But the EPA, who dictates and rules over these disposal sites in the ocean, stopped at 1.5. So that left us with the material left. We did a valid effort and a lot of work. Part of the lobbying was just to get that. And that removed, how many yards of material that removed that we didn't have to take care of in the CAD?
About 75,000.
So 75,000 yards now went to the ocean for that fight, the rest still being here. So that's significant. Again, there's a lot of details, a lot of years of pushing on this. I would say, and I support the mayor's motion if he wants to go that way, but I want to make sure it's very clear, if it's okay with the council, that this is just a secondary backup and this is not the primary path the council wants to go. I'm worried that the regulatory agencies, in a confusion, might say, oh, well, maybe we should just wait for you to make that decision. We have timetables on this money. Our sediment characterization study has 1 more year life on it. I can't speak to the Corps, but I know there's money timelines on this thing. And then to permit something like that and there's policy questions too. I would be interested if the council would even say, we would allow that. I don't know. And one last thing, I'm sorry to clarify. When I said it takes up half the site, I was wrong in the sense that I meant it takes up half the building side of the flat lower castaways now. There is a flat area on top, and they propose that, and they could put more coastal sage scrubber out there. I don't think you'd build a building at the end of castaways, but there is a flat top. There's usable area depending on that. But again, you try to get into permitting of this. Let's say we do want to go down this as easy as a backup. You're talking years. And you're probably missing your federal funding window, just to be honest. I'm not saying this to scare anybody. I mean, after going through all the years and Washington trips, and I look at how long it's taken us to permit just where we're at, this will take permitting time. There were a lot of options looked at. Someone mentioned there weren't. I sat through those. We talked about, and Diane, you were there, we talked about trucking it off at the Rhine Pier. We talked about looking for options at the wharfs. Those were explained to people that we did look at them. It wasn't like we didn't have options. CAD was not the only option. That was an incorrect statement. We looked at a lot of them. It came down to the CAD's the most feasible option that we think we can do and permit, and that's why the environmental analysis went down that road.
I get that.
Just to clarify that.
Well, I appreciate that, Dave. I mean, just hearing you speak now, you've done certainly the thorough analysis. As Mrs. Councilman said earlier when she spoke, I did say that when I guess that anchor person was making that presentation, when I asked the question, is there anywhere in the United States where a CAD is this close to residential property, and he said he wasn't aware of it. So it's all commercial property that the existing CAD examples are within proximity to commercial property, not residential property. And that is what gives me concern. I know you've explored every part of the bay, but, and Mr. Ball makes a good point. I mean, it's going to hit some residential area regardless, which is the furthest point away. I just want to be absolutely sure that we're just not finding the most convenient place, and it's right in the middle of all the yachting activities, regardless of whose home it's in front of, but it's within 25 yards of residential property. It just concerns me. I mean, whether it's anywhere, even in a landfill, 25 yards from residential property, that concerns me. So I will support the mayor's motion, but I would say to Mr. Palmer, Mr. Lucky, at least determine through your independent analysis that this site is viable. And if we're short 56,000 cubic yards, that's a problem for me. We can't be going around looking for different sites. We have to find a viable site, a repository for the waste material. And I agree we cannot slow down the process, so the city's process would continue on its track. And if you feel that you can validate your plan, I think we should be responsible to consider that, because it could be a better location. I don't care for this right now, so it's got to be better than this. That's kind of where I am. Thank you.
And I just need to clarify my motion, because staff normally is not opined on a motion. My motion is that staff can continue with the current process through the regulatory agencies to see if a permit's approved or not. That will provide some guarantees that it's likely not something to be worried about as far as pollution goes in the water. At the same time, they're held down a parallel path. They do not need to submit a permit request while one's pending for the alternative, but you'll have it in the queue so that if yours is denied, you have a quick alternative to go to. I understand this is taking years, and we don't want to interfere with that. At the same time, if this is denied, if any underwater containment's denied, we need an above-ground alternative if we want to dredge, which we do. And that's where Team Palmer's plan could save the day if we could find a way to get it permitted, whether all the sediment and debris goes there or not. Okay, Councilman Duffield.
Thank you, Mayor. This word toxic being thrown out is just so damaging. And to get up in front of everybody and say that, you really are setting everybody back. And the material is already there. It's there now. If you drag your anchor today, you're going to turn it up now. If your grandchild makes a sandcastle on the beach, it's using that material now in its hands. So, just so we're all aware of that. And then we have identified all of the material unsuitable in front of people's homes, which was stated earlier. We haven't. We have. We know where it is. That's how we measured it. Right? So to say that some of these homeowners have to go through a measuring process, we've already tested it. We know where it is. The alternative plan, don't dredge. You want an alternative plan? Just don't dredge at all. Because the fish have never been healthier. People are eating them. There's no one ill. There's no record of anybody becoming ill from water quality in our harbor right now. So this material, this big scare, the word toxic, has been thrown around and caused you to believe that there's this poison, that everyone's going to die. Look, it's there right now. So all this argument about anchors and throwing around is ridiculous. We have an opportunity to get our harbor to a level that it hasn't been in since 1938. Once we do, the water flow will be so fabulous, as in 2012 example showed us. We now have species of fish that we haven't seen in decades back in our harbor. And if we do this 1 more million cubic yards out, our harbor will be like it was when I was a boy. I used to eat clams in front of our house. I'm still alive. I'm not dead. So So this is our goal, is to make the harbor the way it was when we were first here and before the San Diego Creek brought all this junk down, before the Irvine Company diverted the San Diego Creek so they could build 50,000 homes. That's what caused it. So we've fixed all that now. We're not seeing any more sediment coming down in the quantities it was. We're managing it. So if we get to this design depth, finally, since 1938, we don't have to do it anymore. But at the end of the day, don't dredge. That's your alternative. Right, Dave? I mean, you don't have to dredge. The bay's fine. If you like it the way it is, because it's not toxic. And the EPA is not demanding we do it. But we've worked hard. It's a federal channel, and we got federal money, and they put it there, and we can use it, but we can't use it fully because they won't give it. They previously hadn't given us the money to dredge. So we fought and fought and fought, and we got the money. Now we can get our harbor back to the way it was. So if you don't want to do that, go ahead and just do your motion, because we will, if you delay this thing, we will not ever do this. We will never do this in the future.
I don't think we're delaying.
Yeah, I've never been so mischaracterized in this dais. I never said that it's toxic. I said we don't know about toxicity. I never said that someone was going to die, and I never said that we should not dredge. Quite the opposite. I'm saying there's an alternative if this is not approved by the environmental agencies we have to get permits from.
Keep it going on schedule.
And to keep going on schedule with what you're doing. So I think there's a lot of, I don't know, confusion. Councilman Avery.
I think it's important to do what we can to explore alternatives, but not at the cost of losing this plan and losing this timing. So to the degree that we can explore it, and if it gains traction, take a look. But I want to say also, this headland here is an iconic bluff in Newport Beach, and people go by it, and it's an important historic feature of this town, as far as I'm concerned. And I think a lot of people are concerned. It's a very unique, if you've walked it and you've walked along this beach, the face of it, and it's wonderful to see something that's just raw and it's been unchanged. This was a former Newport landing site where the ships would come in and rest up against the side of that beach, and by virtue of the downhill slide, they could load cargo just sliding it down a chute. And there's lots of photos and documentation of it, and I'd hate to see it defaced with this, frankly. And I am all for, if we could find a solution that didn't produce the CAD, I'd be all for it. But it's 10,000 dumpsters, dump truckloads of travel out of town, and I understand it's not really viable. So those are my two thoughts. I'm perfectly fine with the mayor's motion, but it cannot stop this process, and it cannot threaten it. We need to keep focused on it. There's been a lot of work here, and the long-term health of the bay is dependent on the depth being constant and lower than it is now, because when we get in the future, it's going to be hard to do this again, and the bay is going to fill up over time, and it's happening every day to a more or less degree, but certainly when we get these big storms, like I'm sure it filled up to some degree with our last winter storm. So the viability of the bay is directly tied to the depth, and the water flow is also important, and when we dredge, we get more water flow. So that's where I'm at, but I'm happy to pursue the second alternative as long as it's doesn't impact our this plan. And then if we learn something, to Palmer's point, if there's some miscalculation, something's really wrong here, we need to flush that out. We should flesh that out while we're moving ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Brenner.
I had a question about how high in front of the bluffs at this location would the sediment or the material, how high would it rise up next to the bluffs? I can't read.
I can't see the grades. I was asking Chris. I think that's about level with the bluff. They're showing that flat area on top.
All the way.
Comes
So it would
out.
block
They
the
would push-
bluff entirely.
The bluff would be behind that. That's what that picture represents. And that was the policy question, unfortunately, that we never talked about in the Harbor Commission. I was wondering, I wonder what council would think about that, the residents. This is a change. Whether it can be built is engineering-wise, I can make it happen. Should it happen is a whole question for you all. But it is a substantial amount of material, 100,000 yards, if that's the case. We can validate those numbers. I think we mentioned Marie Marston's a civil engineer. She sat in the Harbor Commission and did a calc, and she thinks it's not that way. I have trust in Anchor, too. Again, I always deal with two consultants with two different things, but I think we can get a third body and check that real quick. But should you want to go down this parallel path, I guess my question would be, and I'm happy to work with Team Palmer on that, would you even approve such a thing? Because if you don't do that, where's the material going? Is it 20 feet higher on the whole site? Because I think this fills it up to the road level and then goes back and goes up the slope is what that represents.
Well, the reason I ask that is because I spent about 8 hours at a Coastal Commission meeting one time where they were looking at a project that was going to go down a bluff site and block the view of the bluff from across the bay, from one of the parks across the bay. And they were all set to deny this project before it was pulled because they thought the view of the cliffs was important. So I'm wondering if that's their predisposition towards things, whether that would be a concern to them on this one as well.
We have not shown this to the regulatory agencies in terms of that. Again, that's where Jim Campbell, I'm sorry he's not here tonight, he spoke from the coastal side. He doesn't think it's permissible because of the bluff concern, putting all that material there. It can be built. Can we get it through the permit process? If I can push it through, it's going to take some time. But I haven't asked the question directly, would they even consider something like this? There's a lot of other parameters. I'm sorry, there's so much detail because now you're talking about if this material is unsuitable sediments for the bay, we put it here. I don't know how you classify it. Is it a landfill? Do I need a containment structure so it doesn't leach back out into the bay? We didn't even get into those details. And I do appreciate this consultant doing that, but you got a lot of details to work out to make the regulatory application on this.
Okay, and would you refresh for my memory the difference between the amount that the feds will allow us to dump in the ocean and the amount that we think ours is? Is it 1.5 to 1 point what?
0. 1.0 to 1.5.
And ours is?
Material that we're considering or have been considering during this entire process has been at 1.5 parts per million.
Okay.
And so if we don't take care of the other material in the harbor, then the EPA has told us that they would reduce that threshold to, wait, do I have
1.0.
1.0.
Back to them.
So in other words, it would be more material. In other words, they are saying that they would support this if we did more to take care of our harbor.
Are there any appeal processes that we did not exhaust in trying to, because that's obviously the best option is if we could get it disposed of out in the ocean, but are there any processes that we have not gone through where we could perhaps appeal that?
I feel like we've exhausted all the way up to the very top of EPA headquarters, and that's why we've been going to Washington, D.C. and to San Francisco, and part of all of our regulatory meetings that we've had. I don't know of any other option to relax that standard.
Okay. I feel like, Palmer's option is going to be paid for by him. It certainly doesn't hurt to explore that avenue while we are doing everything possible to move forward, because to lose this money would be unconscionable on our part. I hate to waste money, even your money, Palmer, though, so that's why I look at the cliff and think that the Coastal Commission was so definitive about not being able to block the view of that cliff from across the bay when I was there. So I could go along with the parallel path.
Thank you. And I believe when I was talking to staff, this is one rendering. I don't think coastal would approve messing with the bluff at all either. And I think that there's not even enough room for all of it anyways. So the hope was that part of it could go here, especially the lower part where you don't see from the bridge, and then the staff help find another location. It really requires staff, in my opinion, to actually even want to do this. But yeah, I don't think you can, I don't think coastal would even allow it, and I don't think it would make sense either. Councilman O'Neill.
Yeah, I suppose I'm probably in the same boat as Councilmember Avery, which is there's been a lot. There's an extraordinary amount of effort in permitting and federal work, and a lot of agencies working on this. So, to the extent this is not slowing down the process, and absent some extraordinary finding from the other consultant, that's kind of the direction it sounds like it's probably heading. Do want to say real quickly to everybody working through, and frankly, especially our harbor commissioner, thank you. You're volunteers, and so I just want to say thank you for the effort and time that you've been putting into this. It's an extraordinary lift, and there's going to be dredging that you will see that you'll have played an enormous hand in. I just want to say how much I appreciate the time and effort that you've been putting into our harbor. It's showing already, and it's going to continue to. So just want to say thank you. And so. Yeah, and actually, just real quick, I know Councilmember Duffield was also thanking a lot of people for kind of getting this to this point. I just want to say to Councilmember Duffield, thank you for all the work that you've been doing, the time that you've been spending back in D.C., and I mean the yeoman's work that it's taken to get to this point is enormous. So I just want to say thank you for the effort you've been putting onto that. Look, we're going to get to the right place here. It's taken a while, so. I can understand supporting this. Moving forward on the parallel paths, but there's a lot to the timing on this, and so I'll support it as long as we understand that the parallel paths are actually parallel and one's not slowing down the other. Thanks.
I just asked one more question. We're not the only harbor in the country. So we're not the only harbor that dredges. Is there any, like capturing CO2 and that type of thing that companies have and jurisdictions have cap and trade? Is there any other harbor, have you explored an opportunity to buy some credits from another harbor that they don't have as much sediment to remove, and that we could haul it up to a harbor or something? I mean, is this the only, here we have a federally recognized water system here, or harbor, obviously. That's why Army Corps is involved, the U.S. Congress is involved, and we have just this little part of the ocean right outside our harbor that we can be allowed or permitted to dispose of non-toxic waste. It just seems like within the 3-mile limit of the borders of the United States, that there would be another place to put this?
Rest assured, we are not the only harbor, specifically in California, who has an issue with how to manage dredged material. I'm a member of a California group so I'm well aware of all other harbors in California, and virtually every harbor has a sediment disposal issue. There are many harbors who are trying to dredge and who are trying to fight for dollars from the Corps of Engineers, and it always comes down to sediment disposal. If it's not one thing, it's another with harbors up and down our coast.
So everybody's
we're not alone in this boat.
Well, in the spirit of saying thank you to our residents, that's what my responsibility first and foremost is, to listen to the residents, and we certainly, I believe, we've given residents a forum to present their case, and thankfully we have a resident who has the wherewithal, the financial wherewithal to see this through. We are immensely grateful to you, Palmer, and the councilmen have been at every meeting, and we're trying to find, I think you hear this with everyone up here, we're trying to, one last gasp here to try to see if there's an alternative to doing the CAD in our harbor. And I think we've turned over literally, no pun intended, every rock, every piece of sediment everywhere to figure out what to do with this. We're trying very hard. I want to thank staff, thank our community, our residents and the Harbor Commission for giving it such a thorough review and analysis. And everyone has put forth their best effort, I believe, to find the best way to dispose of non-toxic waste. And we'll give it one more breath of life if Palmer can have the independent study of his plan. I honestly don't think this is a good way to design this. As Ms. Brenner said, I would be so shocked if Coastal would endorse that, as well as just our residents would having to be looking at something that is cement climbing up the cliff, and the bluff. So let's give it one more gasp of life to see if there's an alternative. We do not want to slow down anything. We don't want to jeopardize the money that Mr. Duffy will work so hard, and Mr. Avery and staff to secure it. That's huge. And let's just give it one more chance to see if there's another way to do it, just to give our residents a feeling that we are really listening to them. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Duffield.
Chris, how many dredging jobs in the state of California were funded this year, this last trunk of money? How many of those were funded from the feds for the state of California this time?
One.
And which one would that be?
Newport Harbor.
Thanks.
I haven't heard a single person up here say they're against dredging. You know? I mean, it's like getting insulting, Duffy. This is all moot if your plan is approved by the regulatory agencies.
Congresswoman Michelle Steele. She got it over the line for us. Others have done that too, but she did get it over the line. Thank you.
With Councilmember Duffield voting no, the motion carries 6-1.
Okay, why don't we take a quick 5-minute recess and we'll run through these 4 items really quickly. Okay, thank you. All right, we are reconvened. We now open it up to public comments on non-agenda items.
Well, hello. Hello and good evening, Mayor Muldoon, Council. My name is Dennis Bress, resident here at Newport Beach. Good news. With the help of Chair Dixon and Vice Chair Noah Blom via the Newport Beach Aviation Committee and staff, Grace and Tara and Aaron and dedicated volunteers, and most important with the help of our County Supervisor, Katrina Foley and team, I'm here to report we will be standing up in February and March the first ever JWA Fly Quiet program where this will have staff and automation that will monitor every single departure, every single day, week, month, and categorize them in order to get each and every departure through our community to be high, slow, and quiet, and not low, fast, and loud. We currently have 450 departures on average daily, and unfortunately, our ex-supervisor, Michelle Steele, voted yes to expand the airport and allow expanded facilities for GA corporate jet, so that our future is going to be 600 per month, 800 to 1,000 departures per month through our community, which means the JWA Fly Quiet program is going to be vital to our daily lives in Newport Beach with this amount of aircraft activity. Michelle Steele is no friend of the beautiful city of Newport Beach. Yesterday, the city put out a press communication about the fantastic news that we managed to get from Washington, D.C. via the infrastructure bill, $8.3 million for the much-needed dredging of our beautiful Newport Harbor. Unfortunately, Congresswoman Michelle Steele is no friend of the beautiful city of Newport Beach, as she voted no on the bill. The local federal electeds who did vote yes for this vital money were Congresswoman Katie Porter, Congressman Mike Levin, Lou Carrera, and Alan Lowenthal. Also, Congressman Harley Ruda and team had a lot to do with these funds and sausage making back in D.C. I think the city should honor their hard work publicly. This was a total team effort. I have not seen any city public press saying thank you for the $10 million that our awesome city received from the American Rescue Plan from Washington, D.C. We got $5 million last year and $5 million soon this year. Vitally important and unexpected money for our police, fire, city services, families, kids, and businesses. Again, Congresswoman Steele is no friend of the city of Newport Beach, as she voted no on this bill, while all the other local congressional members voted yes for us to receive this $10 million. We all work hard in the sausage making to ultimately deliver a product to you electeds so that you can then vote yes or no. This is what you are doing tonight, good local government at its finest. We expect our electeds at state level to go to Sacramento and fed to Washington, D.C. and bring home the bacon so that at the city level, local government can use those funds to help our city and its families, kids, and businesses to be the best they can be. Thank you for all your hard work. Go USA.
Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Susan Skinner, and I'm here to address the flawed elected mayor proposal that this committee or this council put on the ballot. I'd like to share with you a press release that was released today by the Lincoln Club and ask you to consider doing what they ask you to do. So the title is The Lincoln Club of Orange County Urges a No Vote on the Newport Beach Elect Our Mayor Ballot Measure. The subtitle, Amending the Charter is a Bad Policy Solution to a Non-Existent Problem. This is from today. The Lincoln Club of Orange County, California's most preeminent conservative donor organization, announced that its board of directors voted unanimously, I'll emphasize unanimously, to oppose the Newport Beach Elect Our Mayor ballot measure. The ballot measure would substantially amend the city's 70-year-old charter process for selecting the mayor and, among a number of problematic provisions, allow for an individual to serve consecutive terms of 16 years, I say that again, 16 years, total on the city council and in the office of the mayor. Potential mayoral candidates would only need to establish residency in Newport Beach for 30 days. Additionally, the ballot measure would consolidate the 7 district councils, or council districts, into 6, expanding the population of each council district and reducing an individual voter's representation. Lincoln Club of Orange County President Teresa Hernandez issued the following statement, and I quote, like a hammer looking for a nail, this is a solution to a non-existent problem. As those in favor of changing the charter cannot find any negatives to our current system of governance, we're calling on them to end this pointless expedition and get back to the issues that Newport Beach families care about. We trust the residents will reject this measure outright and preserve the process of governing in Newport Beach that have served the city so well since its founding." Unquote. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mayor Muldoon. My name is Jim Mosier, and speaking of issues that residents care about, it was evident from your announcements that you made a couple of hours ago that there is considerable interest in the new residential trash collection program that is going to be implemented. And I think there is considerable confusion about the 500-page contract that you approved with CR&R at your last meeting. And I wanted to pose a few questions that I think the answers to which may or may not be forthcoming tonight, but I think the answers are of interest to many residents here. As a minor example of the confusion surrounding this, in your announcements you said that the green carts would be coming starting in February. It's not February yet in my neighborhood and all the streets around me. The green carts actually arrived yesterday with the guide here for recycling connected to it. The most important question I wanted to ask is that in the staff report from 2 weeks ago, it said that out of the 24,000 homes that are served by this new contract, 10,000 of them require a CR&R person to move the cart to the truck to pick the cart up, in especially the split truck that will be serving the congested areas in Corona del Mar and on the peninsula. And it said that there is an $8.30 a month extra fee for that. And the staff report said the residents will be paying that. So are residents going to get a bill for $8.30, 10,000 households? Or is the city picking up that charge for what is called standard valet service? Second question, through all the presentations, we heard that there was a series of 3 carts that were available to every household served by this. But in a presentation to the Newport Chamber of Commerce last Thursday, we were told it's not per household, it is per lot. And we have many lots that have multiple households on them. So those, if they want a set of carts for each house, do they have to pay extra for the extra ones? Is it per household or per lot? And then if somebody actually wants to comply and be a good citizen and properly separate their trash, who are they to believe? Where are they to find a definitive list? As an example, there's a list on the city website. One would hope that's a definitive one. It gets changed from time to time. This handout I got yesterday from CR&R says that dairy products are supposed to go in the organic pail. The city website says that they're supposed to go in the landfill one. Who is correct? The city website has been updated because neither of this nor that said what you do with clothing, bedding, and textiles that you put out. The city website now says that you put non-donatable clothing in the black one and old clothing in the blue one.
Thank you, Jim.
What's the difference? Who knows? Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Next speaker, please. Okay, seeing no more speakers, we're on to current business, item number 19. Yeah, sure.
I did have a question about a couple of Jim's statements. Dave, could you clarify this per lot versus per household? Because all the time that I was on that committee, I thought we were talking per household.
Yes, thank you. I was giving the presentation to the Chamber of Commerce, and after I had to leave early on that, and there were some questions about lots and households. I think there's a couple areas that we'll need to look into that. Typically, every household, I'm thinking like a duplex. Some say that's on one lot, but there's 2 rental properties, and right now they have 2 sets of carts. So I think there is some confusion because typically CR&R will go to the lot. Our recycle fee goes to each resident, which would be 2 houses on that lot. So I talked to Mike Martin this morning about that. They're talking about those little issues. I don't think it involves a lot of houses, but some people talked about, I have a fourplex, does everybody get a cart? Whatever they have now, I'm assuming that's what we're going to keep doing. If they all have carts now, that's great. If they have a dumpster service, we'll keep doing that.
Okay. And the standard valet service that they talk about means anytime the driver gets out of the truck to put the trash can in position to be lifted onto the truck?
Yes, the number Mr. Mosier quoted is the one that we got from CNR. Currently today, there are that many people with what they call asked for valet service, and standard is only differentiated by premium of how far they have to go. I apologize, wasn't here last meeting to go on that because of an illness, but I believe remembering the standard is if they have to go more than 15 feet outside you put your carts out in front of your driveway right there. If they have to go about 15 feet and go get them, and some people want them to do that. They're in the side yard, they prefer that, maybe it's a vacation home, they'll get charged a standard pickup on that. If you want to go behind the gate and around the backyard, it's farther, that'd be a premium service. But yes, when you're in an alley, there's a certain amount that we're going to do. There's a guy that goes behind the split body truck and moves the cart from the curb to load the truck.
Right.
That's included. That's not valet service.
Okay.
But if you want me to go get them off your side yard and bring it out and put them back, that would be like a standard valet.
That was my understanding, but I got confused by the remarks. So, because in Corona Del Mar, they have to put them in line to be emptied into the truck, but they move it 2 or 3 feet.
Right. And I don't expect that to be a valet service.
Okay.
That would be normal operation. You're in the zone where we have to pick up the cans. And again, this is because we do that service now. If we're going to charge for that, and that was part of the discussion with the new contract, those folks will have to reevaluate that. Do I need standard service? Do I need premium service? Some people have vacation homes and want their trash taken out all the time, and they're not there. It might work for them. We also remember on ADA, we're going to do it for free. If you're a certified disabled person, they'll pick that up for them and do that service.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I had another request before we go to you, Simone, sorry. On the achieving of the financing for the dredging involved numerous members of Congress over a short time, and actually it goes back even further, but I believe a member of Congress can advocate for something to be put in a bill, an amendment, and still vote against the entire bill, perhaps because there's a large corporate bailout or something they don't support. So staff asked me to issue a statement along with a member of Congress about our gratitude towards Michelle Steele, which we are grateful for her efforts in securing the funds, along with our own staff and council members for doing so. And it's really disheartening to see a display of politics take place from a script. But for those in the audience who may have been misled by that statement, we thank Michelle Steele because she was a big part of it. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Sturgis.
Thank you, Mayor Muldoon and City Council members. The item before you this evening is a resolution to form the General Plan Steering Committee. Back in September, former Mayor Brad Avery, Councilmember Joy Brenner, and Councilmember Will O'Neill formed the General Plan Update Ad Hoc Committee, and that committee has made a recommendation that to start off this General Plan Update is to form a 3-member steering committee, and that 3-member committee would be establishing the general plan update process going forward. They would be making recommendations to City Council on consultant selection. They are the ones to make recommendations to the City Council on forming even a bigger policy advisory committee. So just to start this general plan update, and it works well for staff that we have a 3-member committee that we can talk to, that we can work with. It is a Brown Act meeting. It'll be public hearing, we'll be noticing, and that is the resolution before you this evening to form that 3-member committee.
Any questions? Councilwoman Brenner.
Could I just add that in our thinking about this, we really were looking at the time component and what we needed to get as quickly as possible back on the road to getting our general plan updated, because we need it to be consistent with our housing element. And so this was looked at as a way to just get the process started with these 3 people, but there will be expanded opportunities for others to serve on the larger committee.
Correct. There would be most likely a recommendation to form a larger policy committee. There could be separate subcommittees that are formed with stakeholders, possibly even later in a village or different areas of town. So there's a lot of different ways where the community does get involved in this general update process.
Could you just quickly put that general plan update committee item on the screen? It's the image you created.
And so there on the screen there, we have the hierarchy where we have in the middle is that 3-member steering committee. They would report up to the city council. And if that committee makes a recommendation in the future to form a policy advisory committee there of 20 to 30 members of the public, which we've done before in 2006, that policy advisory committee would report to the steering committee. And so that's the kind of that flow chart that we have. And that's just the ad hoc's recommendation of how this would work going forward with the general plan update process. And then that broader circle around them is that community participation. And everything is driven by the community's involvement.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the dais? All right, seeing none, go out for public comment. Any comments on this item?
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, my name again is Jim Mosier. I would remind you, as I did in writing, that at your meeting in September last year, September 28, you appointed already a 3-member ad hoc committee of the city council to lay out what the plan was for the update of the general plan, timeline, scope, what this committee exactly would be doing, and so forth. So I'm wondering tonight, has that committee of the council, that 3-member committee, completed its work? And is this its sole recommendation? And now it's leaving it to this new 3-member committee, who we don't know who it may be, to determine the scope, timeline, and so forth that the previous committee was supposed to do. And if this is their recommendation, is it really their recommendation here that the 3 members, who the 3 members would be, whether this committee will be 3 council members, 3 residents, 3 experts in planning, 3 whatever, is totally up to you, the mayor, to decide. We have very strange, I've never seen qualifications like this. The 3 members are defined. One of those 3 little silhouettes up there is to be a resident. The second is to be a registered voter. And the third is to be somebody selected by the mayor. Any of you would meet all 3 of those qualifications. So could you give us, or why is there no discussion of who or what you want this committee to look like? It's really strange to me, and I have nothing more to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Okay, seeing none, bring it back to the dais. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion approved?
Motion approved.
Okay. Thank you, Councilwoman Dixon. Any comments on this? Joy, Councilman Brenner? Yeah.
I do think that's a valid point that Jim makes. And, even in our homeless task force, when we had a council committee, that evolved into those 3 council members also serving on the homeless ad hoc and task force committee. So is there a reason that we would not want some of our council members and some general public on that committee?
I'm not objecting to any blend of citizenry and elected. I'll tell you confidentially, one council member has already reached out to me, and he is open and or closed to it. So there's going to be a lot of flexibility. Right now, we're just laying the groundwork for staff to get the ball rolling, and we'll be taking applications.
I'd like for us to have the opportunity for several of us to serve on this committee because it's such an important topic for the community and for them to really trust what we come up with. It's so important that we have people that they trust working on this.
When you say us, you're referring to us on the dais?
I said I would be willing to serve on this committee.
Okay, you, okay, thank
yes,
you.
Yeah,
Okay.
and others might.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Oh, Councilman O'Neill.
Yeah. So when we were talking about this at the subcommittee level, the idea was that this would be an advisory committee to the full council. And so I would strongly recommend that we just keep three non-council members on this. I'm honest, I'm not really sure why we have qualifications that are kind of split up this way either. I had understood that they would be a resident, a registered voter, and a mayoral appointment, all three of them. It's a combined. Why are we doing it where we have like a resident, a voter, a mayor appointment?
I don't know, that's what we were given. That's what we said was the recommendation, so.
I just don't remember us talking about that at the subcommittee level.
Yeah.
We don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember just saying, I remember us saying, look, we want to have this be a citizen-driven effort here that has the ability to give the advice to the council. And the idea is that they would be basically kind of the buffer between council and the much larger group. They would be ones that help advise us on, what kind of qualifications should be in that larger group. So they're going to be the ones that help tee it up for the process to get that much larger group. And then they'd be the ones that, and that would be their first line of advice. And then their second line of advice would be, as this is formed, they would make sure that they're staying on task and they're moving forward. When you put a council member on a committee, they tend to dominate the committee, and there's good reason for it, but that's just how it is. So that's why we coming out of the subcommittee, our recommendation was three residents, not council members. So that's why I wanted to make sure when we're talking about this. Just to be clear, I was not one of the people asking to be, whoever that person was, it was not me who had reached out to the mayor about wanting to be put on this, because I strongly prefer having three residents on here. Frankly, I would hope and expect that there'd be interviews, and then the mayor would make recommendations to the council out of those interviews. But that's my understanding of why we were looking for three members that are non-council members, is to make sure that those are the folks that are giving advice to council, and that's why I think we need to have three non-council members on there. Thanks.
Councilwoman Brenner.
I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other on that, but I do, from what we learned through the committee that was giving us sites for the housing, how they went and they met, and then we got a report from them. I didn't feel like we were as involved or as informed all along the way as we needed to be. I mean, we had to be kind of educated closer to the end by Simone and staff and people from that committee about what all they had done and what we needed to know about inclusionary policy and ADUs and all that sort. So if we have just this committee of citizens, I would like to suggest that we have regular updates with them and that they keep us apprised all along the way of what's happening and if they have any confusion about what we're asking of them and that sort of thing. I just don't want to have a report presented to us at the last minute that we haven't been involved in being created.
Thank you. Councilman Avery.
Yeah, I support the idea. I like the idea of having three residents who obviously have background of some type that would, be worthy of the assignment. And I just think it's a good way to go.
So I think to resolve this evening, we should probably submit an amended motion that would include clarification, either excluding council members or including the possibility of council members on this committee, because I think the vagueness is going to be a problem for staff if we just approve the motion as made.
Well, I mean, you're the one who's going to be nominating, so just don't nominate a council member.
You make a good point, but I don't. Yeah, is that fair for me? I'd rather my colleagues make the decision.
All right, I'll make
vote.
them. I'd recommend a friendly amendment that the qualifications of appointed members would be that they be all three: a resident, a registered voter, and a mayoral appointment. Period. And not a city council member, a current city council
Or
member.
commissioner or committeeman? Or
no,
is
if
it-
you wanted to put someone else on who's serving in a different capacity, that's fine, but it just, since this committee would be, reporting to us, I just think that it should not include one of us. So
Of course.
Maybe a possible solution. I served on the Library Lecture Hall Committee, so it was all residents and one council person. I was ex officio, and I don't think I intimidated anybody. But to your point, Ms. Brenner, it allowed me to represent the council and share and update and speak along the way. So, wonder if I even was a non-voting member. So that might be something to consider.
Do you know Ms. Harp? She was a non-voting member.
Yeah, you could do that if you wanted
Do you recall in this instance, was she?
Oh, do I recall? What was it, the committee?
This is Library Lecture Hall.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either, but it could be a non-voting council member of that.
So I'm trying to pass the buck, so you would have to make that in some sort of motion. Or?
Right. Okay. A friendly amendment? Who made the motion?
Friendly amendment made by Councilman O'Neill.
Oh, all right.
To
What do you
exclude
think
council
about that,
members.
Mr. O'Neill?
I wouldn't recommend it on this one. I just think that this really is the group that's going to be making a recommendation to the whole council. And I don't like the idea of one council member being a part of all of the discussions. I think all of us need to get the information basically at the same time. So I wouldn't,
Okay.
I wouldn't recommend that for this one. It makes sense for the library lecture hall. I just wouldn't go on the general plan. I think that we really should have the three, because they're not making policy. That's kind of it's important to recognize what they're doing. They're not actually making the policies. What they're doing is they are going to be recommending to us like what that bigger body looks like, and then they're going to be the buffer between us providing those updates that Councilmember Brenner was talking about. They're going to be providing those regular updates on what's going on down, or not down, but at the, at the bigger committee. They're going to be filtering ideas up to us regularly so that we have an idea of what's going on.
Well,
So they're not, so having a council member on there doesn't add anything. It probably just detracts from making sure that we're all on the same page at the same time as this moves forward. So that's why just keep the three citizen members, and then, again, they're not the ones making the policy. The much bigger group is going to be the one recommending policy.
It's not to be debated, but I will say, I mean, I appreciate Ms. Brenner's point about having a council member. There is a value, whether it's policy or not, when there's a council member, people, if they're all citizens, they seek opinion of, well, what do you think? Is this the right way to do this? Is this what do you, I mean, there's just kind of guidance along the way that's informally offered. But as I hear myself talk, I guess that staff could answer the same question. So anyway, that was a possible, I withdraw it then. I thought it was a possible solution.
Oh, no, it's possible. It is possible. I'm saying because of the gravity of this, I would prefer that one of us not be on there to be providing that informal guidance, because that one person can't possibly speak for the seven of us. And I don't want any accusations of bias in this process. Like, if we can minimize that in this process, we will be better off. Because this is going to be a contentious process anyway. Given what we have to do with the housing element, all the ramifications that deal from there to all of the other elements, it's going to be tough enough. I just would prefer to keep as much.
Well, I think, but the point is valid, that I think there may be something built into the process that the council, there needs to be reports to the council on it.
That's what I was going to make an amendment asking if we could ask for at least monthly, I mean, maybe every meeting, but at least monthly reports from one or more members of this group to the entire council so that we stay up to date the whole way through the process. Would that be agreeable?
Yeah, so if you go down to the purpose and responsibilities section, so section G says make periodic reports. So I think you'd prefer, instead of periodic reports, it'd be monthly reports.
I would.
About quarterly.
Monthly would be probably a little tough.
It may
Bi-monthly? How about bi-monthly?
Well, it may move pretty quickly, was what I was thinking, so we might need.
How about at least bi-monthly?
Okay.
I'd be okay with that.
Okay, great. I like it. Okay, so we have a friendly amendment. Do you accept it?
I accept the.
And the second was from?
Me.
And you accept the friendly? Okay, great. So it'll exclude members of council. It will include at a minimum bi-monthly. And the mayor will still have the right to choose the individuals outside of the colleagues on council. Okay, let's vote.
The motion carries unanimously, 7-0.
Thank you. Next, we have item 10, ordinance regarding multiple vessel mooring system clarifying statements and updates.
Mr. Mayor, I have to recuse myself because I'm a member of Newport Harbor Yacht Club that has the mooring field.
Thank you.
I have to recuse myself as a member of an effective organization, I guess.
Thank you.
I also have to recuse for the same reason.
Thank you. All right, this is the way a real city council is. Only a couple members, not 7.
Now, do I need to recuse myself because I belong to the American Legion?
Is she?
I don't belong to the yacht club at the American Legion.
Okay. We're just straws at that point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, seeing that all council members, including Avery, Dixon, and Duffield, have left the room, go ahead, Seth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Chris Miller, Public Works Manager. First of all, I'd like to start off by saying in your agenda packet, there's a revised ordinance, and the revision, it reflects some very minor revisions, and I can just tell you what they are really quickly. We had in section 17.60.040B1. In the agenda packet previous, it listed the harbor department, and we reverted that back to its current language in the municipal code to harbor master. So there's 3 instances of harbor master. We're leaving it alone. We are not changing it as recommended in the ordinance. I just wanted to clarify that. I am here to answer questions, but I'm also just here to give just a couple quick pictures of the multiple vessel mooring system. Be happy to talk about anything in the report and the details, but I thought it'd be important to augment the staff report by showing where the single point mooring fields are in Newport Harbor. One of them is the Balboa Yacht Club field, which is shown in yellow. The other one is the Newport Harbor Yacht Club field, shown in yellow. And my last slide is a real-life depiction of a multiple vessel mooring system, which is able to have boats tied to either side of it. I'm happy to answer any questions, and most importantly, members of the Harbor Commission are here to elaborate and also augment the conversation. They did the yeoman's work on this, and they're happy to help in any way.
Thank you. Before we go to public comment, do any harbor commissioners wish to address us?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Ira Beer, Harbor Commissioner. I just want to mention real quick that this was in response to a few initiatives and public comment that had come before the commission on several occasions that try to make room for smaller boats be accommodated within the yacht club mooring field. So we came up with this solution. One of our initiatives is to sort of keep the, not consolidate or make better efficiencies of the space that we have to use. This is a little contrary to that because it's increasing the footprint of what a mooring would normally look like with one vessel on it. The float is 6 feet wide. You'd have theoretically a harbor 20 on each side or 2 on each side, depending upon the length of the floats, which are approved at 20 and 40 feet is what we're looking to approve. So it does offset that footprint issue a little bit, but it accomplishes a lot. And we've reached out to the yacht clubs, and I think there's a good consensus there. And I think this would be a first step in a multi-tiered process. Down the road, we'll look at 2-point moorings and going a little further with it. But for right now, we're excited to get this done and provide this benefit to the yacht clubs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Beer, yes.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, not to clarify, but to elaborate very briefly, what this does is we have an existing program for the multiple vessel mooring system. It's been in place for many, many years. What we've done is we've finally written some rules about them and updated our harbor design standards and our public works standards so that we have standards on how to review and approve these.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions from council before we go to the public? Seeing none, public comments on this item, please come forward. Thank you. And if anyone else wishes to speak, please come to the front.
Thank you, Mayor Muldoon. My name again is Jim Mosier. I have two questions about this. First, the recommendation here is for the benefit of 2 yacht clubs in Newport Harbor. Given all the council recusals, when this recommendation was being considered by the Harbor Commission, shouldn't any harbor commissioners who happen to have similar membership have recused themselves, as well as any staff people who have such memberships? That's question number one. And question number 2 is, looking at this looks very much like a harbor structure, like a dock float. And I am curious if the city staff regards these as being structures, which, in addition to the permit to be approved by the harbor master, being a structure in the coastal zone, whether it requires a coastal development permit as a dock float would. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other comments on this item?
Yes, hello. My name is Heidi Hall, and the Harbor Commission has done an outstanding job on this for all the work that they've had to do, and they have put into it, and I thank them over and over again. It was brought to my attention because I believe it was in January 2020, Title 17 was revised by the Harbor Commission and voted on by the City Council. In the original title, it allowed for this system, as you have stated, which was a single mooring permit. In the new one that was voted on by the City Council, it allowed for a 2 mooring system to get a permit for this, which was great because that's where I got involved, because I have a mooring that has 2 cans on it. So what we're being asked to now is to take that away from us, to go back to a single can system. And I'm not sure the specifics behind it. I know that there's a lot coming down the pike and what they're working on. I'm not privy to that. But if the intent is to disallow the 2 mooring permittee not to do this while they're doing other things in the background, then don't change the wording. It took too long to put it in. But put a moratorium on that and leave the wording in. And then when the moratorium is leased, we're not back in front of the City Council again asking to get the wording redone, asking the attorney to rewrite it, and to get new votes on it. So I certainly understand that there's other things going on I don't know about, but please don't change the wording in this back to a single mooring system. Keep it as it is now, saying that it's available to any mooring in the harbor. Put a moratorium on until the work is done that they need to have done, and then reverse that moratorium and continue on with what you're doing. This process has taken over 6 months just to change the wording. So I think we could eliminate a lot of staff and attorneys and things like that if we just keep it as is, put a moratorium on it, release the moratorium when the time comes, and we all continue going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Kevin, would you ask someone to talk about that? Okay, good.
Yes. Make sure, are there any other public comments on this item? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Beard, do you want to address?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the reference that Ms. Hall is making to Title 17, I believe there was a reference to allowing a 2-point mooring system to have a float. However, Title 17, when that review was done, was rather extensive. I'm of the opinion that that what was actually reflected wasn't truly what was intended. And a significant issue that we face right now in the harbor, in the mooring fields, is they're a mess, putting it plainly. Over the years, when the Orange County Sheriff's Department had control of approving extensions, it was sort of a common practice. Hey, you need 5 feet, we'll take a look, looks good here, you need 10 feet there. And over the course of literally decades, you could see what we have. It's created a situation where we now need to go in and improve the safety of the navigation. We need to re-identify where these rows should be, where the fairways should be, and you make better efficiency of space. So while we would like to accommodate all the requests of all the stakeholders, if we were to allow a 2-point mooring on a float on a 2-point mooring, the additional width that would take up versus a regular vessel is probably triple. And it would defeat the purpose of trying to redesign things for better efficiency and safer navigation. Additionally, part of the plan is to introduce the floats to a 2-point mooring system for city-owned moorings. And that's kind of what the whole premise has been. So we weren't taking anything away from anyone. To the best of my knowledge, there isn't one single 2-point mooring float on to a mooring permittee that's not city-owned at present. And so we're not taking anything away. That was never the intent. I think it's just clarifying it and laying the groundwork for us to accomplish step 1, get the 2 points in the yacht club fields because they can easily accommodate it. There's no rows and fairways in those single points. So that's a good first step. It's sort of low-hanging fruit. Step 2, let's look at how we're going to better utilize the space and put in the 2-point system. So this is a real important first step, and I hope you can appreciate, Ms. Hall, the efforts that we would like to accommodate, but that's kind of where we are of our opinion at this point.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments from the dais? We don't have public comments been closed on the item. I did have you're putting me in a bad spot because I have questions too. Sure, come on up. I ask you just to be very brief and keep professional. Thanks. Yeah, it's okay. I have questions too.
Because one of the reasons that I'm bringing this to your account is that current Harbor Master Paul Blank, before he had this, he was on the Harbor Commission. And when I asked him about what this was all about, he told me in a July 6, 2020 email, he told us the original multiple vessel mooring system, floating docks, were restricted to the BYC and NHYC mooring fields in the prior version of Title 17. Those restrictions were specifically lifted when the current version of Title 17 was approved earlier this year and made effective in March. He also mentioned that such systems are now permissible at all mooring fields as long as they comply with the standards. Excuse me. From Scott Cunningham, Harbor Commissioner, on 9/16/21 email, we spoke at length at the last HC meeting about our desire to increase capacity with focus on the smaller boats in the 20 to 35 foot range. It can't come quick enough, in my opinion. But as you know, in order to add capacity, we need to think outside the box. Our harbor is not getting any bigger, as they explained, and the demand is going through the roof. Len Boss recently commented that as Harbor 20 slip fees are doubling later this year, we want to drive that cost way down by bringing on the multiple vessel mooring systems. If it was up to me, we would have built them today. In another conversation with Duffy, he mentioned that when they were updating the Title 17, and he was in this very beginning.
So, ma'am, what I don't understand is, okay, I understand the narrative. What is your personal gripe with the proposal?
I'm just saying that he was saying that it wasn't supposed to be for everybody. But that's not the information I was given by people who put it together originally.
And how does that impact you?
I'm a two mooring person who was trying to get a permit.
Okay, you feel left out of the
MVSA.
opportunity. You're not coming from a public policy standpoint, you're coming from it personally?
I'm coming from yes.
Okay.
Because when it was redone, I was allowed to have it.
Very good.
Now that
Understand.
it's taken away, it's not allowed to anybody, except for, as he's saying, a
Ah,
city
now-
permittee,
now I
which
understand.
I am not because I lease mine.
And where are you, where is yours?
Off of Balboa Island in the South Bayfront?
Okay, now I understand. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
But who I've talked to, it's supposed to be available to everybody,
Understood.
not just city-owned.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Beer.
Just real quick, I want to mention that if, in the mooring field referenced, the rows, there's between 6 to 8 at the lowest side, 4 or 5, because it's a narrow field. If those vessels had a float with a vessel on each side, there's not going to be any room in between.
Yeah, no,
There's
yeah.
just no way. And so that's why we have to first redesign things so we can introduce that to increase capacity later. And that's exactly what we're working very diligently on right now.
Yeah, and that's how I understand the narrative. Thank you for your thoughtful effort in finding locations where this makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that the location that perhaps we previously thought would work for it is not working according to this plan. That might change down the road, but I understand your reasoning.
Yeah, and it will open up spaces where it can occur. I can't comment if it will occur in that field. That is sort of a special, narrow field. It's very congested, so probably not likely, just being honest, but I don't know until this is completed, so, which I hope is in the next 8 to 10 weeks.
Very good. So I apologize, Ms. Hall, that your location was not included in this, but it's been quite a moving target and a big project, and I understand why the commission chose these locations for it. Okay, does that make sense? Mr. Brenner, great. Okay, so I will make a motion to approve the item. Let's vote.
And just briefly, we circulated an amended ordinance where we made a couple of minor modifications.
Thank you.
With the recusals, the motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item 11. This is a resolution adopting the 2022 Key Management Compensation Plan, amending the city salary schedule. Oh, yeah, well, everyone. Yeah. Aaron's getting them. No, Aaron's getting them, yeah. The recusal on this item?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name-
Is there a request for a long staff report on this? Okay, do you want to be very brief?
I will try to be as brief
Okay,
as possible.
great.
By way of background, the Key Management Compensation Plan outlines the terms and conditions of employment for 90 unrepresented employees. The plan is not a contract, and it's not negotiated with the employees. The proposals for the 2022 plan include a 4-year term, wage adjustments of 2% each January, a one-time lump sum payment of $2,000 for covered employees, city-paid short-term and long-term disability benefits, and for executive management employees, the implementation of a 401A defined contribution plan where the city would contribute 2% of base salary each year. Is that brief?
It's very brief. Thank you very much. Any comments from council or questions? Okay, seeing none, call to public for comments on this item. Okay, great. Seeing none, coming back. Is there a motion? Council, Mayor Pro Tem Blum. Seconded by Councilwoman Dixon. Let's vote.
The motion carries unanimously, 7-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item 12, is there a conflict on this item?
Oh, hold on, Mayor.
The city clerk needs to read the ordinance.
Oh, thank you, yes.
For item
For number
10.
10.
My apologies.
That's
Ordinance
okay.
2022-4, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Newport Beach, amending Section 17.01.030 and Section 17.60.040 of the Newport Beach Municipal Code to delete vessel length requirements and clarify approval responsibility for the multiple vessel mooring system and to require compliance with applicable plans and specifications.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 12, third amended and restated employment agreement for the city manager. Is there a conflict on this?
Yes, there is, for my personal interest on this, so I'm recusing myself right now.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Leong has left the room. Is there a request for report on this item? Seeing none, go out to the public. Is there a comment on this item? Please come forward.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
There is a legal requirement that she provide a very brief report.
Okay, very good.
Sorry.
You
That's
have
okay.
to
I
hear
should've
from
said-
me one more time tonight.
That's okay.
And again, I'll be brief. This third amended and restated employment agreement provides for a 5-year term ending December 30th, 2026, a 5% merit adjustment upon contract effective date. Thereafter, cost of living adjustments, which are tied to those received by executive management members in the key and management group, beginning in January of 2023 and each January thereafter. Additionally, the proposed agreement provides for 2.5% performance pay, which is contingent on satisfactory performance reviews. And then the implementation of a deferred compensation account, a 401A account with annual city contributions as follows. On the effective date of the agreement, if it's approved, a deposit of $29,500 over the year, increasing by $5,000 in January of each year for the remaining term of the employment agreement. Also, there is an adjustment proposed for her flex leave accrual rate, which would adjust up to the 15 and over category for executive management employees, and a severance agreement that would provide a cash settlement equal to her monthly salary multiplied by the number of months remaining on the unexpired term of her employment agreement, but this would be subject to an 18-month cap. And that completes my summary.
Thank you so much. Public comments, please come forward.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. The staff report says you met 4 times in closed session to discuss the terms of this contract. So you are apparently very familiar with them and did not need much of a report. The staff report, however, is not very transparent at communicating to the public what the changes in the contract are. There are, I believe, 5 employees in the entire city of Newport Beach who have contracts that are separate from the memoranda of understanding you have with the various associations. They are the city manager, the city attorney, the city clerk, the chief of police, and the fire chief. Over the years, you've adjusted all of those contracts so that they are on an automatic annual renewal system. The city manager's current contract was approved, I think, at such a time that if you did nothing tonight, that contract would automatically renew tomorrow. This new contract is different from any of those other 4 and is changing from annual renewal to a fixed 5-year term. All of those other contracts also, in case you wanted to replace, or the city manager wanted to replace one of those employees, provide a maximum severance benefit of 6 months' pay. This one now is providing an extremely generous up to 18 months of pay if for no cause you want to replace the current city manager. I, as a member of the public, have no idea why you are changing from the automatic annual renewal to a fixed 5-year term, and especially I do not understand why you're offering 18 months, a year and a half of salary in order to let somebody go, when in all other cases, including the former city manager, Dave Kiff, the term was never more than 6 months of severance pay. So I don't know if you want to answer, but I certainly don't know what you discussed in closed session that led you to either of those conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other comments on this item? All right, seeing none. I was going to bring it back up to the dais. And Mayor Pro Tem Blom.
Thank you very much. And Jim, I appreciate your comments on it, and it's nice the public always has a watchful eye over what we're doing up here. It's excellent. When it comes to that top line staff that you just mentioned, I think you can wholeheartedly agree that we have some of the best management of any city around. It's not true only in our fiscal dealings. And I also think it's important to note that we are a fiscally conservative city that's just not doling out money for no reason. When we look at where some of these managers fall, it's very important to realize we want to be in a good place because retaining top talent is extremely difficult right now. And nothing that we've done here have we shot over some of the other cities. I think we're still in the second quartile, right around there, or right maybe midline for what other cities have done throughout. Some of the changes were necessary because of how this compensation package worked with legal requirements in order for some of those benefits to work through. The severance without cause, well, I think the city is very happy with our current position. We would like to keep people here as long as possible, and I think the city of Newport Beach has done probably one of the best jobs of any city in Orange County maintaining these top-level people for long periods of time and not continuously going through that top staff, which is extremely more expensive to replace on a regular basis than to get someone to want to be here for their entire career. So I just want to reiterate, we're privileged to be where we are. It's never easy to negotiate money, especially when we're doing it with the city. But this is one of those things where we are very, very lucky as everyone's looking for another job that these people want to stay with us. So, you know, this is one of those moments where I think we should look and commend the staff we have. This is not an easy job. It's very, very hard. And, you know, I'm personally very excited that Grace is willing to work with a deal like this. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Moved by Councilman Avery. Seconded by Councilwoman Dixon. And just, I'll make quick comments. I view the very high members of staff more from a private sector lens than possibly I even should. For the record, I think that our city managers are doing a fantastic job, but I'll be voting against this item more based on small deal points than anything. So our performance has been excellent. Let's vote.
With Mayor Muldoon voting no, the motion carries 6-1.
Madam Clerk, please read announcements for motions for reconsideration.
A motion to reconsider the vote on any action taken by the City Council at either this meeting or the previous meeting may be made only by one of the council members who voted with the prevailing side.
Any motions to reconsider? Seeing none, we are adjourned.